I never thought I'd need my law degree to protect myself from my own father. Standing in my grandmother's kitchen at 32, watching Dad and his new wife Sharon walk through my front door with predatory smiles, I felt my world tilt. "Pack your things, Natalie," Dad announced, tossing legal papers on my counter. "This house is mine now." Sharon's crimson lips curved into a satisfied smirk as she ran her manicured fingers along my grandmother's antique china cabinet. "Time to move out, sweetheart." The morning had started peacefully with coffee in Grandma Rose's favorite mug, the one with hand-painted violets that she'd bought at a craft fair 40 years ago. I'd been living in her Victorian home for 3 years since she passed, maintaining her garden and preserving her memory in every carefully tended corner. The house stood on Maple Street, its wraparound porch and gingerbread trim making it a neighborhood landmark that people photographed during their evening walks. I was reviewing a client's contract at the kitchen table, surrounded by case files and the comforting scent of cinnamon from the candles Grandma always loved. The doorbell's chime interrupted my concentration, its melodic tone echoing through the high-ceilinged rooms. Through the peephole, I saw Dad standing there with Sharon, both dressed like they were attending a business meeting rather than visiting family. My father wore a charcoal suit I'd never seen before, his silver hair slicked back with too much product. Sharon stood beside him in a navy blazer and pencil skirt, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that made her face look sharper than usual. Their formal attire should have warned me something was wrong, but I'd grown accustomed to Dad's theatrical tendencies. "Natalie," Dad said, as I opened the door, his voice carrying that false warmth he used when he wanted something. He pushed past me without invitation, Sharon following with her designer heels, clicking against the original hardwood floors. They surveyed my home like buyers at an open house, Sharon's green eyes calculating the value of every antique, every carefully preserved detail. "We need to talk," Dad announced, setting his leather briefcase on the dining table with unnecessary force. The sound startled Whisker's grandma's ancient tabby cat, who'd been sunning himself on the windowsill. Dad pulled out a manila folder, extracting documents with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "I've discovered something important," he said, spreading papers across the polished mahogany. "Found these in Mother's safety deposit box at First National Bank. Seems there was another will one that reflects her true wishes." According to these documents, the house belonged to him as her only surviving child. The papers looked official, complete with raised seals and multiple signatures. Sharon leaned over his shoulder, pointing out specific clauses with a manicured nail, her perfume overwhelming in the close space. "Your grandmother clearly states here that the property should pass to her son." Sharon said, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. "She must have been confused when she made that other document, leaving it to you. Poor thing was quite ill toward the end." I picked up the papers, my hand steady despite the anger building in my chest. The formatting looked professional, the language properly legal, but something felt wrong about the paper quality, slightly too bright, too new for a document supposedly created years ago. "This is dated just 2 months before she died," I said, keeping my voice level. "I was caring for her daily then. She never mentioned changing her will." Dad's expression shifted to practiced sorrow. "She probably didn't want to hurt your feelings. You know how she was always trying to protect everyone's emotions. But blood is blood, Natalie. The house should stay with direct descendants." Sharon had already moved into the living room, running her fingers along the crown molding, mentally calculating renovation costs. "We've already consulted with contractors," she called out. "This wallpaper will have to go, of course. And that library your grandmother kept perfect size for a home theater." The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a physical blow. Grandma's library, where she'd taught me to read, where we'd spent countless evenings lost in stories together, reduced to entertainment space, for a woman who'd known her for less than 2 years. "The greenhouse will make a lovely spa room." Sharon continued photographing the French doors that led to the garden. "All those old plants taking up valuable square footage. We're thinking Japanese soaking tub, maybe a sauna." My grandmother's greenhouse, where she'd cultivated rare orchids and taught me about patience and growth, where her heritage tomatoes still grew from seeds passed down through generations. I watched Sharon document my home like a conquest, each photo another violation of sacred space. Dad pulled out more papers, sliding them across the table with practiced efficiency. We've already spoken with our attorney. Everything's in order. We're prepared to give you 30 days to relocate, which is more than generous considering the circumstances. The papers included formal eviction notices, all properly formatted and filed. They'd been planning this ambush for weeks, maybe months. Every visit Sharon had made, every seemingly casual question about the house's history, had been reconnaissance for this moment. You can't be serious. I said, though, the evidence of their seriousness lay spread across my grandmother's table like battle plans. It's already done. Dad replied, his mask of sympathy slipping to reveal satisfaction underneath. The locksmith is scheduled for next month. I suggest you start looking for apartments. Something downtown would suit you better anyway. Closer to your law firm, more appropriate for a single woman your age. The condescension in his voice sparked memories of every time he'd diminished me, every achievement he'd ignored or belittled. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Grandma Rose and the sanctuary she'd created, the legacy she'd specifically wanted me to preserve. Sharon returned from her tour, her phone full of images and measurements. My daughter, Madison, needs a place to stay after her divorce, and my son, Brian, could use the garage apartment while he gets back on his feet. Family helps family, after all. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Here they were trying to steal my family home while preaching about family values. But something else caught my attention as I examined their documents more carefully. The notary seal looked slightly off-center, and the date stamp had the kind of crisp clarity that suggested modern printing, rather than the slight smudging of actual ink stamps. More telling was the paperclip holding everything together. It was bright silver, untarnished. Grandma had been particular about her office supplies, always using the brass clips she'd inherited from her own mother. This small detail, invisible to anyone who hadn't spent years working beside her at this very table, told me everything I needed to know. They'd made their first mistake, and I was just getting started. Sharon pulled out her phone again, this time showing me detailed renovation plans that made my stomach turn. The architectural drawings bore the logo of Pemberton Design, the most expensive firm in the city. They'd already invested serious money in their scheme, so confident in their forged documents that they'd begun the transformation of my grandmother's home before even setting foot inside today. The kitchen will be completely gutted, she explained, swiping through three-dimensional renderings. These old cabinets might look charming, but they're not practical. We're thinking Italian marble, perhaps some smart appliances. Your grandmother's style was quaint, but it's time to bring this place into the 21st century. Those cabinets had been built by my great-grandfather, each door carefully carved with botanical motifs that matched the garden outside. Grandma had taught me to make pie crust on that worn wooden counter, her hands guiding mine, as we rolled out dough for Sunday dinners. Dad settled into what had been Grandpa's chair, a calculated move that wasn't lost on me. I know this is difficult, he said, adopting his reasonable father tone. But you have to understand, maintaining a property like this is expensive. The taxes alone would eat up most of your salary. Sharon and I are in a better position to preserve the family asset. Preserve it by destroying everything that makes it special. I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Modernizing isn't destroying, Sharon interjected, her tone suggesting she was speaking to a child. We'll maintain the historical facade, of course. The neighborhood association requires it. But the interior needs a complete overhaul. That ancient heating system, the original plumbing, it's all a disaster waiting to happen. I knew for a fact that Grandma had updated all the major systems 5 years ago, spending a considerable sum to ensure everything was safe and efficient while maintaining the house's character. Sharon either didn't know this or was counting on me being too emotional to contradict her lies. Besides, Dad added, you're hardly ever here with your busy career. The house sits empty most days. Sharon works from home, so there would always be someone here to appreciate it. Another lie. I worked from home 3 days a week specifically so I could tend the garden and maintain the house properly. My home office occupied the sunroom where Grandma had taught me to paint watercolors, the light still perfect for detailed work. Sharon had moved to the china cabinet, now examining the collection of depression glass that Grandma had accumulated over decades of estate sales and flea markets. Some of these pieces might be worth keeping, she mused. The rest can go to auction. No point hoarding all this clutter. Each piece had a story. The green candy dish bought on Grandma's honeymoon, the amber platter that had held every Thanksgiving turkey for 50 years, the cobalt blue vases that Grandma filled with roses from her garden every summer. To Sharon, they were just objects to monetize. I've already arranged for an estate sale company to evaluate everything, she continued. They'll be here next week to start cataloging. You can keep any personal items you want, of course. We're not heartless. The casual assumption of ownership, the way she'd already scheduled strangers to paw through my grandmother's treasures, made my hands clench into fists. But I forced myself to remain calm, to think like the lawyer I was, rather than the granddaughter they were trying to dispossess. You mentioned you found these documents in a safety deposit box, I said, keeping my tone conversational. Which bank I'll need to verify that for my records? Dad's eyes flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. First National Downtown Branch, box number 543. The bank manager can confirm I'm listed as a signatory. Another lie. Grandma had banked with Community Trust, the small local bank that had held her accounts for 60 years. She distrusted the big national chains, preferring to do business with people she knew by name. And your attorney who reviewed these documents, I pressed. I'd like their contact information. Richardson and Associates. Sharon supplied quickly, too quickly. They specialize in estate law, very reputable firm. I knew Richardson and Associates. They'd been disbanded 2 years ago after a fraud scandal. Either Sharon had done inadequate research or she was testing to see how much I actually knew about the legal community. The eviction notice is already filed with the county, Dad said, pushing another document toward me. You'll receive official service in a few days, but I wanted to handle this personally. Despite everything, you're still my daughter. The words rang hollow. He hadn't remembered my birthday in 5 years, hadn't attended my law school graduation, hadn't visited once during the 3 months I'd spent caring for Grandma during her final illness. His definition of fatherhood extended only as far as his financial interests. The house has been in our family for 4 generations, I said quietly. Great-grandpa built it with his own hands after immigrating from Poland. Every room holds our history. Exactly why it should stay with the bloodline, Dad countered. You might marry someday, change your name. The house would pass out of the family entirely. The casual misogyny of his argument shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. As if my potential marriage somehow diminished my claim to my grandmother's legacy. As if Sharon, who'd married into the family 18 months ago, had more right to this house than the granddaughter who'd helped maintain it for decades. Sharon had discovered the door to the basement and was heading down the stairs. Oh, this space is completely wasted, her voice echoed up. We could put in a wine cellar, maybe a home gym. All these shelves of canning jars and preserves. Honestly, who does that anymore? I did. Every August, I continued Grandma's tradition of putting up tomato sauce pickles and jam from the garden's harvest. The basement shelves held 3 years of my efforts, plus some of Grandma's last batches that I couldn't bear to open. The property value alone makes this worthwhile, Dad said, apparently abandoning any pretense of sentiment. The neighborhood's been gentrifying. That new development 2 blocks over sold units for triple what Mother paid for this place. We'd be fools not to capitalize on the market. There it was, not preservation or family legacy, just pure greed dressed up in legal documents. But he'd revealed more than he intended. If they were planning to sell to developers, they'd need clear title, no challenges or complications. My very existence in the house complicated their plans. So, you're planning to sell? I asked, letting disappointment color my voice while mentally cataloging their admissions. Not immediately, Sharon said, returning from the basement with cobwebs in her hair. We'll live here for a while, establish residency. Makes the capital gains situation more favorable. Plus, I've always wanted a historical home. The Instagram potential alone is worth it. She pulled out her phone again this time, showing me her social media accounts. Thousands of followers watching her curated life, every moment staged for maximum impact. I could see the future she envisioned my grandmother's home reduced to a backdrop for sponsored content and lifestyle blogging. We'll need you out by the 15th of next month, Dad said, checking his phone calendar. That gives you 5 weeks total, more than fair considering we could demand immediate vacation of the premises. Based on documents you conveniently just discovered, I kept my voice mild, but inside I was building my case. Based on your grandmother's actual wishes, he replied firmly. Whatever document you have was clearly produced under duress when she wasn't thinking clearly. No court would uphold it against her real will. The irony was staggering. Grandma's mind had been sharp until her final days, something her doctors had marveled at. If anyone was operating under false pretenses, it was the man sitting in front of me with his forged papers and rehearsed lies. Sharon had wandered into the pantry, emerging with one of Grandma's recipe boxes. Oh, these might be worth something. Vintage recipes are very trendy right now. I could do a whole series on retro cooking. Watching her flip through cards written in my grandmother's careful script, each one annotated with memories of family gatherings and special occasions, I felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. They weren't just stealing a house. They were planning to dismember a life, parceling out memories for profit and social media engagement. I'll need time to review all this with my own attorney, I said, gathering the documents they'd spread across the table. Of course, Dad agreed too readily. But don't drag this out, Natalie. The law is clear, and fighting it will only cost you money you don't have. Accept the situation gracefully, and we might be able to help with your moving expenses. The condescension dripped from every word. He assumed I was still the scared little girl who'd believed his promises about weekend visits that never materialized, who'd waited by windows for a father who always had somewhere more important to be. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a lawyer who'd graduated summa cum laude, who'd won cases against opponents with far more experience, who'd learned from the best teacher of all, a grandmother who'd fought for everything she'd built. As they prepared to leave, Sharon paused at the door. Oh, I almost forgot. We'll need all the keys, including any spares. And the alarm code, garage door opener, all of that. Make a list, would you? She spoke as if I were already a former tenant, someone whose access to my own home was a temporary courtesy rather than a right. Dad nodded approvingly, adding, and start forwarding your mail. We don't want any confusion once the transition happens. They left in a cloud of satisfaction, so certain of their victory that they didn't notice the security camera hidden in the porch light, or the way Mrs. Henderson next door had watched their entire arrival from behind her lace curtains. I stood in my violated home, surrounded by the echoes of their greed, and felt Grandma Rose's strength flowing through me. They'd made their second mistake. They'd underestimated me. The real battle was just beginning. My hands trembled slightly as I spread their documents across the dining table, this time examining each page with the trained eye of an estate attorney rather than a shocked granddaughter. The afternoon light slanted through the lace curtains, illuminating details that Dad and Sharon's confidence had made them careless about concealing. The paper quality was the first tell. I held a sheet up to the light, noting the watermark. Modern paper manufactured no earlier than last year based on the mill's mark. Grandma had been gone for 3 years. Unless she'd developed time travel in her final months, this will was fabricated recently. I photographed each page with my phone, creating my own digital record before they could claim I'd tampered with anything. The formatting contained subtle anachronisms, too. The font was Times New Roman, but Grandma's attorney, Mr. Harrison, had always used Garamond for official documents. A small detail, but lawyers were creatures of habit. The signature line troubled me most. It resembled Grandma's handwriting but lacked the slight tremor that had developed in her final years. Whoever had forged this had practiced on older samples, not realizing her penmanship had evolved with age and arthritis. My laptop was already open on the table, and I began researching Richardson and Associates. As I'd suspected, the firm had dissolved in disgrace 24 months ago. The managing partner was currently serving time for fraud. If Sharon had actually consulted them, it would have been through prison glass. Next, I pulled up the county recorder's website. The eviction notice Dad claimed to have filed should appear in the system within hours of submission. I searched every variation of our names and address. Nothing. Another lie, though, probably one they intended to make true soon enough. The doorbell interrupted my investigation. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Henderson, my grandmother's best friend and our neighbor for 40 years. She held a casserole dish, the universal suburban symbol of concern and support. "I saw your father's car," she said without preamble when I opened the door. "That woman with him, she was here last week too. Walked around your backyard taking pictures while you were at work." My blood chilled. "You're certain?" Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock. I was deadheading my roses and saw her clear as day. She had a measuring tape and one of those laser distance things. Spent 20 minutes in your grandmother's greenhouse. Mrs. Henderson had been a paralegal before retiring. She understood the significance of documentation. "I took photos," she added, pulling out her phone. "Seemed odd someone measuring your property without you home." The images showed Sharon clearly dressed in workout clothes, rather than business attire, methodically documenting my garden. In one photo, she was on her phone, and the zoom revealed she was texting measurements to someone. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson said, settling into the kitchen chair with practiced ease. "Your father's been asking questions around the neighborhood. Wanted to know about property values, recent sales, whether anyone had complaints about the house's condition." She'd brought more than casserole and surveillance photos. From her tote bag, she produced a folder of her own documentation. I started keeping track after he approached me last month. Dates, times, what he asked. Call me paranoid, but Rose always said he'd try something like this. The folder contained meticulous notes in Mrs. Henderson's precise handwriting. Dad had been building his case for weeks, interviewing neighbors under the guise of family concern. He'd even contacted the Historical Society, inquiring about removing the house's protected status to allow for modern renovations. "Did Grandma ever mention anything about another will?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mrs. Henderson snorted a decidedly unladylike sound that would have made Grandma laugh. Rose was crystal clear about her wishes. She told everyone at the garden club that this house was yours. Made quite a speech about it at her last meeting, talking about legacy and the importance of women owning property. She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through videos. Actually, Margaret Chen recorded it. Rose was presenting her heritage tomato seedlings to the club, and she got emotional about passing things down to the right hands. The video showed my grandmother, frail but fierce, standing before her garden club peers. Her voice carried clearly. "This house will belong to my granddaughter, Natalie, just as these seeds will belong to all of you. Some things are meant to be inherited by those who'll tend them properly, not those who'd sell them for profit." The date stamp showed this was 6 weeks before her death, 2 weeks after Dad's supposed will was allegedly created. If his document was real, why would she publicly contradict it? "There's something else," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dropping. "Your father approached my nephew, the one who works in construction, wanted to know about permits for demolishing historical structures, how to work around preservation restrictions. This was 2 months ago, Natalie. He's been planning this for a while." I felt the pieces clicking together. The timeline made sense now. Dad had started laying groundwork months ago, assuming I'd be an easy mark once he produced official-looking papers. He'd underestimated both me and the community that had watched me grow up in this house. "Would you be willing to provide a statement?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I've already written one," she replied, producing another document. "Notarized and everything. Margaret Chen has one too, and Dorothy Williams from the Historical Society. Your grandmother was beloved Natalie. We won't let him steal her legacy. After Mrs. Henderson left, promising to rally more neighbors, I returned to my investigation. The forged will contained other inconsistencies. It referenced account numbers that didn't match any of Grandma's actual financial records. It mentioned pieces of jewelry she'd sold years before to pay for Grandpa's cancer treatment. Most damning, it included a bequest to Dad's first wife, my mother, who'd been dead for 15 years. Whoever had crafted this document hadn't done thorough research into our family history. They'd created a generic will that might fool a casual observer, but would never survive legal scrutiny. I called Mr. Harrison's office, getting his longtime secretary, Patricia. "Natalie, honey, he's been expecting your call. He's in court until 4, but he said to tell you everything's secure in the vault. Every single document, video statement, and codicil your grandmother ever signed." There are video statements. This was news to me. Multiple recordings over her last 5 years. Patricia confirmed. She was very thorough about documenting her wishes, said she knew your father would try something eventually. Smart woman, your grandmother. I made an appointment for the next morning, then turned my attention to deeper research. The Richardson and Associates website was defunct, but archived versions showed their areas of practice. They'd specialized in personal injury and bankruptcy, not estate law. Sharon's quick response had been pure fabrication. The notary seal on the forged will provided another lead. The name was partially obscured, but I could make out enough letters to search the state database. 3 possibilities emerged, but 2 had been deceased before the document's supposed date. The third, Robert Kingsley, had been convicted of document fraud 8 months ago. I cross-referenced Kingsley's case files publicly available through the court system. His client list read like a who's who of elder abuse attempts. 5 cases involving forged wills, 3 fraudulent property transfers, and 2 guardianship scams. Dad and Sharon had chosen their co-conspirator from the worst possible source. My phone rang the display showing my law firm's main number. My secretary's voice carried barely contained excitement. "Natalie, you'll never guess who just called asking about your schedule. Someone named Sharon wanting to know if you'd be in the office tomorrow. Said it was about a family matter." "What did you tell her?" "Just that I'd have to check with you first. But here's the interesting part. She was really pressing about whether you handle estate disputes. Seemed particularly interested in whether you'd ever challenged a will before." They were trying to gauge my capabilities, probably hoping I was too specialized in other areas to fight back effectively. They had no idea that estate law, particularly elder protection, had become my specialty after watching Grandma navigate the legal system to protect her assets from Dad's previous schemes. I pulled out the business card for Detective Morrison, who'd investigated a similar case I'd handled last year. She answered on the second ring, her voice warming when I identified myself. "Another elder abuse situation?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. "My own this time," I admitted, outlining the day's events. "Forged will with a convicted notary's seal. That's bold and stupid. Email me everything you've got. If they used Kingsley's seal, there's an active investigation that might connect." As we spoke, I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw Sharon back at my curb, this time with someone else. A man in contractor's clothing emerged from a pickup truck, and they stood on my sidewalk, pointing at the house's exterior. "I need to go," I told Detective Morrison. "They're back." "Document everything," she advised. "And Natalie, don't let them inside again without a warrant." I grabbed my phone, activating the video record function as I stepped onto the porch. Sharon, startled, clearly not expecting me to be home. "Oh, Natalie," she said, recovering quickly. "I was just showing Tom here the house. He'll be handling the renovations, and I wanted him to get a sense of the scope." "This is still my home," I said calmly, keeping the phone visible. "You have no authority to bring contractors here." Tom looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing he'd been dragged into something questionable. "Ma'am said she owned the place," he muttered, already backing toward his truck. "She lied," I said simply. "I'm the legal owner and resident. Any work done without my permission would be trespassing and vandalism." Sharon's face flushed, but she maintained her composure. "Soon enough, dear. Just trying to get ahead of schedule. Time is money in construction. Tom was already in his truck engine running. He rolled down the window just long enough to tell Sharon he'd need to see proper ownership documents before returning. Smart man. "You're making this harder than necessary," Sharon said once we were alone. "Your father's offer to help with moving expenses won't last forever. Neither will your marriage when he's in prison for fraud," I replied, watching her face carefully. She faltered for just a moment before laughing. "Prison for reclaiming his rightful inheritance. You really have been watching too many legal dramas. No for using a convicted forger's notary seal on fabricated documents, for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, for fraud, attempted grand theft, and whatever else the district attorney adds once they see the evidence." Her laugh died. "You can't prove anything. Robert Kingsley, convicted document forger, currently serving 3 to 5 in state prison. His notary seal was revoked 2 years ago, yet somehow it appears on a will supposedly created last month. Would you like me to continue?" Sharon's careful composure finally cracked. She practically ran to her car, fumbling with her keys. As she drove away, tires squealing slightly on the turn, I saw her frantically pressing her phone to her ear, calling Dad no doubt to report that their plan faced more resistance than expected. Back inside, I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server, creating multiple backups of every document, photo, and video. Then I called my best friend from law school, Jamie Chen, who now worked in the prosecutor's office. "Elder abuse forged documents and your own father." Jamie whistled low. "Girl, you know how to make life interesting. Send me everything. I'll walk it over to the elder abuse unit personally." The sun was setting, painting Grandma's living room in shades of gold and rose. I sat in her favorite chair, whiskers purring in my lap, surrounded by evidence of Dad's betrayal and neighbors' loyalty. The house felt different now, not just a home, but a fortress I was prepared to defend. Tomorrow would bring meetings with Mr. Harrison, conversations with prosecutors, and probably more confrontations with Dad and Sharon. But tonight I drew strength from the walls that had sheltered 4 generations of my family. They'd made their 3rd mistake. They'd given me time to prepare. The antique desk in Grandma's study had belonged to her father, crafted from solid oak with secret compartments he'd designed himself. As a child, I'd watched Grandma retrieve treasures from those hidden spaces, making each discovery feel like magic. Now my fingers found the familiar catch beneath the 2nd drawer, revealing the compartment where she'd kept her most important documents. The original will was there, along with something I hadn't expected, a manila envelope marked, "For Natalie, open only if he tries." My grandmother's foresight sent chills down my spine as I broke the seal she'd placed there 3 years ago. Inside was a smaller envelope containing a DVD and a letter in Grandma's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, your father has finally made his move. I've been expecting it since the day I changed my will. The enclosed video contains everything you need to protect yourself and our home. Remember, sunshine courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. All my love, Grandma Rose." My hand shook as I inserted the DVD into the laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing Grandma in this very room, looking directly at the camera with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "This is Rose Marie Winters." She began, her voice strong and clear. "Today is March 15th, and I am of sound mind and body, as will be attested by my attorney, Mr. William Harrison, and my physician, Dr. Sarah Coleman, both present for this recording." The camera panned to show both professionals seated beside her documents, spread on the desk. Mr. Harrison looked younger, his silver hair not quite as thin, while Dr. Coleman held what appeared to be recent cognitive test results. Grandma continued, "I am recording this to prevent any challenges to my will dated January 10th of this year, which leaves my home at 427 Maple Street to my granddaughter Natalie Marie Winters. This decision was made after careful consideration and unfortunate discoveries about my son, Robert James Winters." She paused, taking a sip of tea from her favorite china cup. Even facing difficult truths, she maintained the grace that had defined her entire life. My son Robert has over the course of many years stolen from me. I have documented evidence of forged checks, unauthorized credit card usage, and the theft of several valuable items from this home. The total amount exceeds $70,000, though I suspect the true figure is higher. Mr. Harrison spoke up. Mrs. Winters has provided me with bank statements, forged documents, and receipts proving these allegations. Everything has been preserved for legal purposes. Grandma nodded before continuing. 6 months ago, Robert attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent. He filed paperwork with the court claiming I was unable to manage my affairs. This was while I was still driving, managing my investments, and hosting weekly bridge games where I consistently won against opponents 30 years younger. Dr. Coleman interjected, Mrs. Winters underwent comprehensive cognitive testing at my practice. She scored in the 98th percentile for her age group. There is absolutely no indication of diminished capacity. The video continued for another 20 minutes detailing Dad's schemes with dates, amounts, and evidence. But the most shocking revelation came near the end. I hired a private investigator, Mr. James Thornton, to look into Robert's activities, Grandma said. What he discovered went beyond simple theft. Robert has been married 3 times, not twice as Natalie believes. His second marriage to a woman named Linda Patterson ended when she discovered he'd mortgaged her mother's house without permission. The resulting legal battle is public record in Tennessee. I paused the video, my mind reeling. Dad had another wife I'd never known about. I grabbed my laptop, searching for Linda Patterson in Tennessee property records. Within minutes, I found the case, Patterson v. Winters, a lawsuit involving fraudulent mortgage documents and elder exploitation. The parallels to our current situation were staggering. Dad had convinced Linda's elderly mother to sign papers she didn't understand, then used her property as collateral for a failed business venture. The scheme had unraveled when Linda discovered the fraud leading to divorce and criminal charges that Dad had somehow escaped through a plea bargain. I resumed the video, watching Grandma outline more discoveries. Mr. Thornton also found that Robert has established a pattern. He targets older relatives or marries women with elderly parents who own property. His current wife, Sharon, fits this profile. Her mother owns commercial real estate in Phoenix worth several $1 million. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Dad hadn't married Sharon for love or companionship. She was another mark, a pathway to her mother's wealth. But Sharon had become a willing accomplice, making her either cunning or catastrophically naive. I've taken precautions, Grandma continued. This house is protected by multiple legal instruments. The deed is held in an irrevocable trust with Natalie as sole beneficiary. Any attempt to challenge this arrangement will trigger immediate investigation by authorities I've already alerted to Robert's patterns. Mr. Harrison added, We've filed sealed documents with the court containing evidence of Mr. Winters' previous fraudulent activities. These will be released if he attempts any legal action against the estate. The video concluded with Grandma looking directly at the camera, speaking as if she knew I'd be watching someday. Natalie, honey, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I tried to shield you from your father's true nature perhaps longer than I should have. But you're strong, stronger than you know. This house isn't just property, it's your heritage. Protect it not just for yourself, but for the daughters who'll come after you. And remember, I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond life itself. The screen went dark, leaving me sitting in silence, broken only by Whisker's purring and the grandfather clock's steady ticking. I wiped tears from my cheeks, overwhelmed by my grandmother's love and foresight. She'd known this day would come and had prepared for it like a general planning a battle. I returned to the hidden compartment, finding more treasures. Bank statements highlighted with Dad's forgeries. Photos of items he'd stolen, each carefully labeled with dates and values. Copies of the fraudulent mortgage documents from Tennessee. A business card for James Thornton, the private investigator. Most interesting was a folder labeled Sharon McKnight Background. Grandma had investigated Dad's new wife, too. Sharon's history revealed a pattern of failed businesses, bankruptcy filings, and lawsuits from former partners. She'd been married twice before both relationships ending when her financial schemes were discovered. One document made my blood run cold. It was a life insurance application Dad had submitted on Grandma 2 years before her death, listing himself as beneficiary. The policy was for $2 million. Grandma had discovered it and immediately contacted the insurance company, voiding the application and reporting the attempted fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Linda Patterson. James Thornton gave me your contact. I heard Robert is trying the same thing with you. Call me. You need to know everything." I dialed immediately. Linda's voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. "Your grandmother reached out to me 3 years ago," she said without preamble, "wanted to understand Robert's methods. I told her everything, including details I couldn't prove in court." "Like what?" "He drugs them," Linda said bluntly. "My mother started having confused episodes after Robert began bringing her special tea. Had it tested later, found traces of benzodiazepine, just enough to make her compliant, not enough to trigger obvious symptoms." My stomach turned. I thought of all the times Dad had visited Grandma, always offering to make her tea. She'd consistently refused, preferring to make her own. Had she suspected even then? "He records conversations too," Linda continued. "Edits them to make it sound like the victim is agreeing to things they never said. He tried to use recordings of my mother in court, but our lawyer proved they'd been manipulated." "Why didn't he go to prison?" "Good lawyer, sympathetic judge, and I was too exhausted to push for the maximum. I just wanted him gone. Your grandmother was smarter. She built a case file that would destroy him if he ever tried again. Guess he thought enough time had passed, or maybe he's getting desperate." We talked for another hour. Linda emailed me court documents, evidence files, and contact information for others Dad had targeted. The pattern was consistent: charm elderly relatives or in-laws, gain their trust, steal their assets, then disappear when discovered. "One more thing," Linda said before hanging up. "Check Sharon's mother. If Robert's running true to form, he's already started working on her. These people don't change, they just find new victims." After the call, I searched for information on Sharon's mother, Eleanor McKnight. She owned a chain of senior living facilities in Phoenix, a self-made millionaire who'd built her empire from nothing. Recent news articles mentioned she'd been considering selling the business due to health concerns. A horrible thought struck me. I called Detective Morrison, who answered despite the late hour. "I need you to do a welfare check," I said, urgently explaining my suspicions. "On it," she replied. "I'll contact Phoenix PD tonight. If your father's targeting another elderly victim, we need to move fast." I spent the next 2 hours organizing everything into a comprehensive file. The original "Will the Video Testimony Bank" records theft documentation, Linda Patterson's evidence, the Tennessee court documents, and proof of the forged will with its fraudulent notary seal. The case against Dad was overwhelming. But I also knew he wouldn't give up easily. Cornered criminals often became dangerous, and Dad had Sharon as an accomplice. They'd invested too much in this scheme to simply walk away. My phone rang, displaying Mrs. Henderson's number. "Natalie, I'm sorry to call so late, but there's a van in your driveway. 2 men are trying to get into your garage." I ran to the window, seeing a locksmith van parked outside. 2 men were indeed working on my garage door lock. Dad had decided not to wait for legal eviction. "Call 911, I told Mrs. Henderson. "I'm going to confront them." "Already calling on my other phone," she replied. "Be careful, dear." I grabbed my phone, activating the record function again, and stepped outside. The men looked up as my motion sensor lights flooded the driveway with brightness. "Can I help you?" I called out, staying on my porch for safety. "Got a work order to change these locks," one replied, looking uncomfortable. "Owner called, said it was an emergency." "I'm the owner," I said firmly, "and I didn't call anyone. You're attempting breaking and entering. The police are on their way." The locksmiths exchanged glances. The older one pulled out his phone, presumably calling whoever had hired them. I could hear him saying, "Lady here says she's the owner." No, I'm not doing it without proper documentation. I don't care what you're paying. They were packing up their van when the police arrived. Officer Chen took their information while Officer Martinez took my statement. The locksmiths had been hired by someone claiming to be Robert Winters, paid in cash, to do an emergency lock change. He said his daughter had gone crazy with squatting in his house, the older locksmith explained. Showed us some official-looking papers. We didn't know. I showed the officers the real deed and explained the situation. They took the forged will as evidence along with the locksmith's work order and contact information. More evidence for the growing case file. After everyone left, I stood in Grandma's study surrounded by proof of my father's lifetime of deception. The portrait on the wall showed her in her prime, strong and dignified, the woman who'd raised me when my own parents couldn't be bothered. I understand now, I whispered to the portrait. You weren't protecting me from the truth. You were preparing me for it. The hidden compartment had one more surprise. At the very back, wrapped in tissue paper, was Grandma's engagement ring and a note. For when you need courage, wear this and remember you come from a long line of fighters. Love, G. I slipped the ring onto my right hand, feeling its weight like armor. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation Dad wouldn't see coming. He thought he was playing chess with a pawn. He was about to discover he'd been facing a queen all along. The morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for early spring golden sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows as I prepared for battle. I dressed carefully in my best courtroom suit, the charcoal gray one that made opposing counsel take me seriously. Grandma's engagement ring caught the light on my right hand, a talisman of strength. Mr. Harrison's office occupied the top floor of a Victorian building downtown, its windows overlooking the river. I'd been here many times with Grandma, but never for something this personal. Patricia greeted me with a warm hug and knowing eyes. He's waiting for you, she said, leading me to the familiar conference room. And Natalie Rose would be so proud of how you're handling this. Mr. Harrison stood as I entered his presence, commanding despite his 78 years. The conference table held several boxes of files, each meticulously labeled in his precise handwriting. I've been preparing for this day since your grandmother first voiced her concerns. He began without preamble. Everything is here. Original documents, certified copies, video testimonies, and some surprises even you don't know about. He pulled out a tablet, queuing up a video. This was recorded 1 week before Rose passed. She insisted on making one final statement. Grandma appeared on screen, frailer than the earlier recording, but with eyes still sharp as crystal. She was in her hospital bed but had clearly prepared for this moment, wearing her favorite pearl necklace and soft pink bed jacket. My darling Natalie. She began, her voice weaker but determined. If you're watching this, I'm gone and Robert has shown his true colors. There's something I never told you, something I should have shared long ago. She paused, gathering strength. Your father has been stealing from our family since he was 16. It started small change from my purse items from your grandfather's workshop sold to pawn shops. We tried to help him therapy counseling, even a stint in military school. Nothing worked. The revelation hit me hard. Dad's crimes went back decades, a lifetime of taking from those who loved him most. When you were born, Grandma continued, I hoped fatherhood would change him. For a brief time, it seemed to work. But after your mother died, he reverted to his old patterns worse than before. He saw her life insurance as a windfall rather than a tragedy. My throat tightened. Mom had died when I was 5, a car accident that left me with fragmented memories of warmth and laughter. Dad had used her death for profit. I've left instructions with Mr. Harrison, Grandma said. Use everything. Hold nothing back. Robert chose his path long ago, and Sharon has chosen to walk it with him. Protect what I've built, protect yourself, and know that I love you beyond measure. The video ended with Grandma blowing a kiss to the camera. Mr. Harrison gave me a moment to compose myself before speaking. Your grandmother was meticulous in her preparations, he said, opening the first box. Here's the original will properly executed with 3 witnesses and video documentation. Here's the deed transfer to the irrevocable trust. Here are the forensic accounting reports showing Robert's thefts over the years. Each document told a story of betrayal and careful protection. Grandma had built legal walls around her assets, specifically designed to withstand the assault she knew would come. "Now," Mr. Harrison said, pulling out his phone, "shall we call your father's supposed attorney Richardson and Associates, wasn't it?" He dialed the number on speaker. A recorded message played, "The number you have reached has been disconnected. Richardson and Associates was dissolved by court order. If you have been a victim of document fraud—" "Just as we suspected," he said, making notes. "Now let's call the real player in this game." He dialed again, this time reaching the State Bar Association. After identifying himself and explaining the situation, he was transferred to the ethics department. "Yes, we're investigating a case of possible fraud involving forged estate documents," he said. "The opposing party claims representation by Richardson and Associates. Yes, I'm aware they were disbanded. The documents bear a notary seal from Robert Kingsley, currently incarcerated, yes." The investigator on the other end promised immediate action. Presenting forged documents as legitimate legal filings was a serious crime, compounded by claiming representation by a disbanded firm. "One more call." Mr. Harrison said, his eyes twinkling with the same mischievous light I remembered in Grandma's. "Your friend at the prosecutor's office asked me to conference her in." Jamie Chen's voice came through clear and professional. "Mr. Harrison, Natalie, I've reviewed the files you sent. We're opening a formal investigation into Robert Winters and Sharon McKnight Winters for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Warrants will be issued this afternoon." That fast? I was stunned by the rapid response. "The evidence is overwhelming," Jamie replied. "Plus this connects to 3 other cases we're investigating. Your father's name came up in an elderly abuse ring we've been tracking. This gives us the probable cause we needed." After the call ended, Mr. Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Your grandmother knew this day would come. She also knew you'd need more than just defensive weapons. She left you offensive ones, too." He produced another folder, this one marked Property Intelligence. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Rose hired investigators to research every property Robert had ever touched, he explained, including some interesting discoveries about Sharon's assets. "Did you know she doesn't actually own the house she claims as her residence? It belongs to her ex-husband, who allows her to live there as part of their divorce settlement. One violation of the agreement, such as criminal charges, and she's evicted immediately." The implications were staggering. Sharon was risking homelessness for this scheme. Her desperation made more sense now. "There's more," Mr. Harrison continued. "That Phoenix property development Sharon's mother owns, Robert has already taken out loans against it using forged signatures. The banks don't know yet, but when they find out, he'll face federal charges for bank fraud. I finished my legal mind racing through the implications. Interstate commerce wire fraud, it compounds exponentially. Your grandmother found evidence of 6 different schemes Robert was running simultaneously," Mr. Harrison said. "She documented everything, but held it back, knowing it would be more powerful deployed at the right moment. That moment is now." My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. "Phoenix PD confirmed. Eleanor McKnight has been hospitalized 3 times in the past month for confusion and memory issues. Her signature appears on several suspicious documents. We're coordinating with Adult Protective Services." The scope of Dad's crimes kept expanding. He wasn't just a thief, he was a predator who specialized in victimizing the elderly, including his own mother. "What do you need from me?" I asked Mr. Harrison. "Stand strong," he replied. "They'll escalate when they realize their scheme is failing. Document everything, don't meet with them alone, and let the legal system work. Your grandmother built this case over years. All we have to do is execute her plan." I left his office with copies of key documents and a flash drive containing all the video testimonies. The weight of evidence was overwhelming, but I knew Dad wouldn't surrender easily. Desperate people did desperate things. My phone rang as I reached my car. Dad's number showed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Natalie, this is ridiculous. Call off whatever dogs you've set on us. We can work this out as a family. I'm your father, for God's sake. Sharon and I are willing to compromise. Maybe shared ownership, call me back." Compromise. Now that his plan was crumbling, he wanted to negotiate. But you can't compromise with someone who sees you only as an obstacle to profit. A second call came through, this time from Sharon. Her voicemail was less conciliatory. "You have no idea who you're messing with. I have connections, resources you can't imagine. This isn't over. That house will be ours one way or another." I saved both messages, forwarding them to Detective Morrison and Jamie. More evidence of their ongoing conspiracy. Back home, I found Mrs. Henderson in my garden watering Grandma's roses. Several other neighbors were with her, including Margaret Chen from the Garden Club and Dorothy Williams from the Historical Society. "We've formed a watch," Mrs. Henderson announced. "Someone will always have eyes on your house. My nephew installed extra cameras this morning, all recording to the cloud. Anyone tries anything suspicious, we'll know immediately." The support overwhelmed me. These women had been Grandma's friends, and now they were mine, forming a protective circle around her legacy. "There's something else," Dorothy said, producing a folder. "The Historical Society is filing emergency papers to increase the house's protected status. No modifications will be possible without our approval, which I assure you won't be forthcoming for your father's plans." Margaret added, "The Garden Club is documenting the heritage plants in your greenhouse. Some of those tomato varieties are registered heirlooms. Destroying them would violate preservation laws." They'd found ways to add legal protections I hadn't even considered. Grandma's community was fighting back with their own weapons. My phone buzzed with an alert from the security system. A car had pulled into the driveway, one I didn't recognize. Through the window, I saw a man in an expensive suit approaching the door. "I'll handle this," I said, but Mrs. Henderson was already on her phone. "Police are 3 minutes out," she reported, "just in case." I opened the door before he could ring the bell. The man smiled, all teeth and false charm. "Ms. Winters, I'm Bradley Thornton from Thornton Real Estate Development. I understand this property may soon be available. I'd like to make a preemptive offer. Cash quick closing, well above market value." "The property isn't for sale," I said firmly. "Not yet," he agreed, still smiling. "But circumstances change. Your father suggested I speak with you directly. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." So Dad was already trying to sell my home before he even possessed it. The hubris was breathtaking. "Mr. Thornton, you're trespassing on private property to discuss a fraudulent real estate transaction," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm an attorney specializing in elder abuse and real estate fraud. Would you like to continue this conversation, or would you prefer to leave before the police arrive?" His smile finally faltered. Behind him, a patrol car turned onto our street. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, backing toward his car. "I was given incorrect information. My apologies for disturbing you." He left quickly, tires chirping slightly in his haste. Officer Chen pulled up moments later, taking my statement about the attempted transaction. Another piece of evidence showing Dad's conspiracy extended to third parties. As evening approached, I sat in Grandma's study reviewing everything that had happened. In one day, Dad's carefully constructed scheme had begun collapsing. But I knew this was far from over. Cornered criminals lashed out, and Dad had shown he was willing to go to extreme lengths. My phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Is this Natalie Winters?" The voice was elderly, female, and uncertain. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Eleanor McKnight, Sharon's mother. I'm in the hospital in Phoenix. The doctors say I've been poisoned. They found something in my system, some kind of drug. The police are here, and they said you might be able to help me understand what's happening." My blood ran cold. Dad had actually poisoned Sharon's mother, just as he'd apparently done to others. The depravity was beyond what even I had imagined. "Mrs. McKnight, I'm so sorry. Yes, I can help. Can you put one of the officers on the phone?" The next hour was spent coordinating with Phoenix authorities, sharing evidence and building connections between the cases. Eleanor McKnight was lucky. She'd survived what could have been a fatal scheme. Others might not have been so fortunate. As night fell, I walked through the house checking locks and alarms. The neighbor's watch was in effect porch lights on up and down the street in a show of solidarity. Grandma's house stood strong, protected by love, law, and community. But I knew tomorrow would bring new challenges. Dad and Sharon were still free, still desperate, and still dangerous. The real battle was just beginning. The next morning arrived with an unexpected cold snap frost glittering on Grandma's garden, like scattered diamonds. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through legal strategies and possible scenarios. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Jamie Chen. "Warrants signed, arrests happening this morning. Stay home, stay safe." I made coffee in Grandma's kitchen using her routine as an anchor. Grind the beans, heat the water to exactly 195 degrees, pour slowly in circles. The familiar ritual calmed my nerves as I prepared for what promised to be a difficult day. By 7:30, I was dressed in another power suit, this one navy blue with subtle pinstripes. I retrieved my law license from the wall, polishing the frame until it gleamed. Something told me I'd need its symbolic weight today. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock. Through the peephole, I saw Dad and Sharon, but this time they weren't alone. A man I didn't recognize stood with them, tall and imposing in a black suit that screamed enforcer rather than attorney. I activated the security system's recording function and opened the door, keeping the chain engaged. "Can I help you?" Cut the act, Natalie. Dad snapped his mask of paternal concern, completely gone. "This is Marcus Webb, our security consultant. We're here to collect what's ours." Marcus Webb stepped forward, his presence meant to intimidate. "Ms. Winters, I specialize in property recovery. Your father has hired me to ensure a smooth transition. It would be best if you cooperated." Property recovery. I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You mean you're a hired thug who helps people steal houses?" His jaw tightened. "I'm a licensed security professional. Now, are you going to open this door, or do we need to explore other options?" The threat was barely veiled, but I'd dealt with bullies in courtrooms. "Mr. Webb, are you aware that presenting fraudulent documents to claim property is a felony? That conspiracy to commit fraud carries mandatory prison time? That threatening a homeowner on their own property is criminal intimidation?" "We have legal documents," Sharon interjected, but her voice lacked yesterday's confidence. "Forged documents created with a convicted criminal's notary seal," I countered. "The police and FBI are already investigating. Your arrest warrants were signed this morning." That was a calculated gamble. Jamie had said arrests were happening, but hadn't specified when. The effect was immediate. Marcus Webb stepped back, his intimidating posture shifting to self-preservation. "You told me this was legitimate," he said to Dad, real anger in his voice. Dad tried to maintain control. "She's lying, trying to scare you off. I'm the rightful owner. The documents are real." I lifted my law license, holding it where they could see it clearly. "I'm Natalie Winters, attorney at law, specializing in estate litigation and elder abuse prosecution. Bar number 47916. I've personally prosecuted 17 cases of property fraud in the last 3 years with a 100% conviction rate." Sharon's face had gone pale. "You specialize in what?" "Elder abuse prosecution," I repeated slowly, "including cases where adult children attempt to steal their parents' property through forged documents. Cases exactly like this one." Marcus Webb was already moving toward the street. "I'm out," he announced. "This isn't what I signed up for. You want to tangle with a prosecutor, do it without me." "We're paying you," Dad shouted after him. "Not enough for federal time." Webb shot back, getting into his car and driving away without another word. The loss of their enforcer shifted the dynamic. Dad's face flushed with rage while Sharon seemed to shrink into herself. "You think you're so smart," Dad snarled. Just like your grandmother always thinking you're better than everyone else. I learned from the best, I replied. Grandma taught me to document everything, verify every claim, and never trust someone who's stolen from family before. I never stole anything. The lie came so easily to him. Tennessee, 2015, I said calmly. Linda Patterson's mother, Arizona, 2019, Sharon's mother. Should I continue? I have the case files for all of them. Sharon turned to Dad, her voice shaking. You said Tennessee was a misunderstanding. You said Linda was lying. She was lying. Dad insisted, but his desperation was showing. I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen. This is Linda Patterson's number. Would you like to call her yourself? Sharon, ask her about the forged mortgage documents, the drug tea, the elderly woman who almost lost her home. You're in contact with Linda. Dad's face went from red to white. And Maria Gonzalez from Tucson, and Patricia Kim from Sacramento. Oh, and Eleanor McKnight called me yesterday from her hospital bed in Phoenix. Funny thing about patterns, Dad. Once people start comparing notes, the truth becomes very clear. Sharon stumbled backward. Hospital bed. What happened to my mother? You didn't know? I kept my voice gentle despite my anger. Sharon might be complicit, but she was also a victim. She's been hospitalized for poisoning, the same drugs found in Linda's mother's system, the same symptoms reported by Maria's father. Does Dad make special tea for your mother, Sharon? The question hit like a physical blow. Sharon's legs gave out and she sat heavily on my porch steps. The herbal tea, she whispered. He said it would help with her memory. Classic benzodiazepine poisoning, I explained. Creates confusion and compliance. Makes elderly victims easy to manipulate, easy to control. Your mother is lucky the doctors caught it in time. Sharon looked up at Dad with dawning horror. You poisoned my mother? Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. A little sedative to keep her calm. She's fine. She's in intensive care, I corrected. The police are with her now taking her statement. She's already identified the tea you brought her, the documents you had her sign. Bank fraud crosses state lines, Sharon. That makes it federal. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Dad heard it too, his eyes darting between the street and my door. This isn't over, he hissed. That house is mine by rights. I'm her son. A son who stole from her for 40 years, I replied. A son she specifically disinherited in a video-recorded will with 3 witnesses. A son who tried to take out life insurance on her without her knowledge. Grandma knew exactly who you were, Dad. That's why she protected me from you. The sirens were very close now. 2 police cars turned onto our street, followed by an unmarked sedan I recognized as Detective Morrison's vehicle. Sharon stood on shaking legs. I need to call my mother. I need to... Sharon McKnight Winters. Detective Morrison had exited, her car badge visible. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud conspiracy and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective read Sharon her rights, Dad tried to edge toward his car. 2 uniformed officers blocked his path. Robert Winters, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit elder abuse in violation of a protective order, filed by Eleanor McKnight. Protective order. I was surprised by this development. Detective Morrison smiled grimly. Mrs. McKnight filed it from her hospital bed yesterday. The moment she understood what was happening, she took legal action. Tough lady. I see where Sharon gets her survival instincts. As they handcuffed Dad, he turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. You destroyed our family, you and that sanctimonious old woman. I hope you're happy. Our family was destroyed the day you chose greed over love, I replied. Grandma spent 40 years hoping you'd change. She documented your crimes but never pressed charges, always giving you another chance. Even at the end, she protected you by not going public. I won't make that mistake. Sharon was crying as they led her to the patrol car. My mother, please, will you check on her? Tell her I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was hurting her. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I'll call the hospital and Sharon cooperate fully. It's your only chance to minimize the damage. As the police cars drove away with Dad and Sharon in custody, Mrs. Henderson emerged from her house, followed by what seemed like half the neighborhood. They'd all been watching, ready to witness if needed. "Your grandmother would be so proud," Mrs. Henderson said, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of lavender and safety. Margaret Chen was recording everything on her phone. "For the Garden Club newsletter," she explained. "Rose's granddaughter, the attorney who took down a property fraud ring. Wait until the ladies at the state convention hear about this." Detective Morrison approached, looking satisfied. "That was textbook perfect. You stayed calm, presented facts, and let them incriminate themselves. Your recording will be valuable evidence." "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline faded. "They'll be arraigned tomorrow. Given the interstate nature of the crimes and the elder abuse charges, bail will be substantial if granted at all. The Phoenix connection makes this a multi-jurisdictional case. The FBI will probably take lead." She handed me her card with additional numbers written on the back. "These are victim services coordinators. They'll help you navigate the process. And Natalie, that comment about specializing in elder abuse prosecution, that was brilliant psychological warfare." After everyone left, I stood in my entryway staring at my law license. I did specialize in contract law primarily, but I'd taken elder abuse cases pro bono after watching Grandma navigate the legal system. Now I understood why she'd encouraged that path. She'd been preparing me to fight this exact battle. I called Eleanor McKnight's hospital room. She answered on the second ring, sounding stronger than yesterday. "Natalie, the nice detective told me they arrested them. Is it true?" "Yes, ma'am. Both of them are in custody. Sharon wanted me to tell you she didn't know about the tea. She's devastated about what happened." Eleanor sighed. "I believe her. Sharon's many things, but she loves me in her own way. That man, though, he's a special kind of evil, pretending to care while poisoning me slowly. The doctors say I could have died if it had continued." We talked for 20 minutes. Eleanor was already working with prosecutors determined to see justice done. She mentioned liquidating her Phoenix properties to prevent any future schemes, planning to put everything in a trust her daughter couldn't touch. "Your grandmother warned me," Eleanor said before we hung up. "Last year, she called out of the blue, said she'd heard Robert was dating someone with an elderly mother who owned property. Told me to be careful. I should have listened better." Even from beyond the grave, Grandma had tried to protect others from her son's predation. Her network of defense extended far beyond just our family. As night fell, I sat in Grandma's chair with Whiskers purring in my lap. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. The danger wasn't completely over. There would be trials, testimony, and probably more schemes from Dad, even behind bars. But the immediate threat had passed. I looked at Grandma's portrait, raising my coffee cup in a toast. "We did it," I whispered. "Just like you planned. The house is safe, and he can't hurt anyone else's grandmother now." The phone rang, showing Jamie Chen's number. "Natalie, you need to know something. We found evidence in your father's car. Lists of elderly people with property research on their health conditions, their family situations. He was building a database of future victims." The scope of Dad's evil continued to expand. He hadn't just been an opportunistic thief, but a systematic predator, treating elder abuse as a business model. "There's more," Jamie continued. "We found a life insurance policy on you, taken out 6 months ago, forged signature. He was planning something, Natalie. Be very careful until he's sentenced and transferred to federal prison." The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the evening temperature. Dad hadn't just wanted my house. He'd been positioning for a larger prize. The thought that my own father had contemplated my death for profit should have shocked me, but after everything I'd learned, it felt almost inevitable. I double-checked every lock, every window, every security sensor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the legal process unfolded. But tonight, I was safe in Grandma's fortress, surrounded by the love she'd built into every wall, every garden bed, every carefully preserved memory. The war might not be over, but we'd won the first battle decisively, and I was just getting started. The courthouse steps were slick with morning drizzle as I arrived for Dad and Sharon's arraignment. Jamie Chen met me at security, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes warm with support. Media caught wind of the story, she warned as we walked toward the courtroom. Elder abuse ring, multiple states family betrayal, it's got all the elements they love. Don't be surprised if reporters approach you. Indeed, the hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with more activity than usual. I recognized a reporter from the local news, another from the state paper. They turned toward us like sharks scenting blood, but Jamie's prosecutorial presence kept them at bay. Inside the courtroom, I chose a seat where Dad and Sharon would see me clearly. Other victims had gathered too. Linda Patterson had flown in from Tennessee looking grimly satisfied. Maria Gonzalez sat with her adult children, tissues clutched in her weathered hands. Even Eleanor McKnight had insisted on attending wheelchair-bound, but fierce with determination. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Patricia Hoffman took the bench. I knew her reputation fair but harsh on elder abuse cases after her own grandmother had been victimized by a caregiver. Dad entered first orange jumpsuit, replacing his usual calculated wardrobe. The sight should have brought satisfaction, but I felt only sadness for the father he could have been. Sharon followed her designer persona, crumbled into a tear-stained woman who looked every one of her 53 years. "We'll hear case number 78942 first," Judge Hoffman announced, State versus Robert James Winters. The prosecutor, a veteran named Michael Torres, outlined the charges with devastating efficiency. 15 counts of fraud, 8 counts of forgery, 6 counts of elder abuse, 3 counts of attempted murder by poisoning. The last charge made the gallery gasp. "Your Honor," Torres continued, "evidence suggests Mr. Winters administered controlled substances to elderly victims with the intent to cause death after securing their assets. 3 victims required emergency medical intervention. We consider him an extreme flight risk and danger to the community." Dad's public defender, looking overwhelmed, attempted damage control. "These charges are excessive, Your Honor. My client is a businessman who perhaps made poor judgments but never intended harm." Poor judgments. Judge Hoffman's voice could have frozen flame. Poisoning elderly women is poor judgment. As the lawyers argued, bail movement in the gallery caught my eye. Sharon had turned in her seat, scanning faces until she found her mother. The 2 women locked eyes across the courtroom, years of complicated history compressed into a single moment. Eleanor McKnight raised her hand slowly, deliberately, and pointed at Sharon, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. Sharon crumbled, sobbing audibly. "I'll hear from the defendant," Judge Hoffman announced, surprising everyone. Sharon stood on shaking legs. "I want to change my plea," she said, voice barely audible, "and I want to testify against him." The courtroom erupted. Dad lunged toward Sharon but was restrained by deputies. His public defender frantically requested a recess while Torres looked like Christmas had come early. "You stupid witch!" Dad screamed at Sharon. "I gave you everything, we were partners." "You used me to get to my mother," Sharon screamed back, finding her voice. "You never loved me. I was just another mark, another path to money." Judge Hoffman banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order deputies separate these defendants. Ms. McKnight Winters, you'll need proper counsel before any plea change. Mr. Winters, one more outburst and you'll be gagged." During the chaos, Linda Patterson leaned over to whisper, "This is exactly how it ended with him before. When cornered, he turns vicious. Watch yourself, Natalie." After order was restored, bail hearings proceeded. Sharon, now represented by a hastily summoned attorney, received bail set at $500,000. Her mother posted it immediately, the 2 women leaving together under Detective Morrison's watchful eye. Dad's hearing went differently. Torres presented evidence of the life insurance policies on me and 2 other elderly victims. He showed Dad's database of potential targets' financial records, revealing hidden assets in offshore accounts. Your Honor, Torres concluded, Mr. Winters has the means and motive to flee. He's also demonstrated willingness to kill for profit. We request remand without bail. Judge Hoffman agreed. Dad would remain in custody until trial scheduled for 3 months out. As deputies prepared to lead him away, he turned to stare at me with naked hatred. This isn't over, he mouthed silently. After court, the victims and families gathered in a conference room. Torres and Detective Morrison updated us on the expanding investigation. Sharon McKnight Winters has agreed to full cooperation, Morrison announced. She's provided access to computers, phones, and a storage unit we didn't know existed. The evidence is staggering. Maria Gonzalez spoke up, her English accented but clear. How many others? How many we don't know about? We're investigating 12 additional cases across 6 states, Torres replied. Some going back 20 years. Mr. Winters was prolific. Linda Patterson laughed bitterly. 20 years of this. How many families destroyed? How much inheritance stolen? Which brings us to restitution, Torres continued. We've frozen multiple accounts, traced property transfers, identified hidden assets. It won't make victims whole, but there's more recovery potential than typical fraud cases. Eleanor McKnight raised a shaky hand. What about my daughter? She says she didn't know, but... Morrison's voice gentled. The evidence supports her claim of ignorance about the poisoning. She was complicit in the property fraud, but genuinely believed the schemes were legal. Her cooperation is invaluable. With a good lawyer and her testimony against Mr. Winters, she's looking at probation rather than prison. The meeting continued for another hour, survivors sharing stories and contact information. We were forming an unfortunate sisterhood bound by one man's greed. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I tried to pass without comment, but one persistent journalist blocked my path. Ms. Winters, how does it feel to send your own father to prison? The question stopped me cold. How did it feel? Relieved, vindicated, heartbroken. All of the above. I didn't send him anywhere. I finally answered. His choices led him here. My grandmother protected our family legacy from a man who saw love as weakness and family as opportunity. If that makes me cold, so be it. Your father claims you manipulated your grandmother. Any response? My grandmother graduated college in 1952 when women were barely admitted. She built a business, raised a family, and accumulated wisdom over 93 years. Anyone who thinks she could be manipulated didn't know Rose Winters. I pushed past them toward my car, but another reporter shouted, "What about forgiveness? He's still your father." That stopped me again. I turned back, thinking of all the victims in that conference room. Forgiveness without accountability enables abuse, I said clearly. My father stole from the elderly for decades. He poisoned women for profit. He took out life insurance policies on victims, including me. Some things are unforgivable, and family doesn't exempt you from consequences. Back home, I found Sharon sitting on my porch steps, Eleanor beside her in a wheelchair. Both women looked exhausted. We need to talk, Sharon said simply. I could have refused, called the police, exercised my legal rights. Instead, I opened my door and gestured them inside. We sat in the living room, 3 women connected by one man's crimes. Sharon spoke first, words tumbling out like a confession. I met Robert at a financial planning seminar. I was broke after my second divorce, desperate to rebuild. He seemed so sophisticated, so caring. He asked about my mother within our first 3 dates, but I thought he was being thoughtful. She laughed bitterly. Every romantic gesture was calculated. The weekend trips were to research property values. The family dinners were to assess my mother's mental state. I gave him access to everything because I thought we were building a life together. When did you suspect? I asked. Little things at first. How he'd redirect conversations to inheritance pushed me to get power of attorney. But the real moment, when I found searches on his computer about benzodiazepine dosing in the elderly, I convinced myself he was researching for a relative. The truth was too horrible to accept. Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. We all see what we want to see. I liked Robert at first, too. Charming, attentive, always bringing those special teas. Even when I started feeling confused, I blamed my age rather than suspicion. He's done this so many times, Sharon continued. The prosecutor showed me files, photos, victim statements. The exact same pattern with every woman he married or dated. I wasn't special. I was just the latest mark with an elderly relative who owned property. Her voice broke. I helped him forge your grandmother's will. He said it was just to scare you, make you negotiate. I knew it was wrong, but thought, God, I actually thought we were clever. I'm so sorry, Natalie. To you, to your grandmother's memory, to my mother. I'm so sorry. What do you say to someone who helped try to steal your home but was also victimized? I thought of Grandma. Her infinite capacity for seeing people clearly while still hoping for their better angels. Sharon, you'll face consequences for your choices, I said carefully. But you're also doing the right thing now. That matters. The prosecutor says if I testify truthfully, I'll get probation and community service, Sharon replied. I'll do whatever it takes to put Robert away. He can't hurt anyone else's mother. Eleanor spoke up, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. I'm selling the Phoenix properties. Everything's going into a trust for Alzheimer's research. If Robert wanted my money so badly, it'll go somewhere he can never touch it. We talked for another hour, sharing information and building understanding. Sharon revealed more about Dad's methods, his research techniques, his ability to compartmentalize family from profit. By the time they left, we weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. We were survivors. That evening, Detective Morrison called with updates. The storage unit was a gold mine. We found documents going back to his college years. He's been running elder abuse scams since he was 19. His own grandmother was his first victim. My blood chilled. Grandma's mother, great-grandma Sarah, had died when I was young. Family lore said she'd been confused in her final year's finances in disarray. Now I wondered if that confusion had been chemically induced. There's something else, Morrison continued. We found journals. Your father documented everything like trophies. Names, amounts stolen, methods used. He was proud of it, Natalie. Saw it as a business model he'd perfected. The sociopathy was complete. Dad hadn't just committed crimes, he'd celebrated them, documented them like a twisted resume. How had Grandma lived with knowing her son was a monster? How had she protected me while carrying that burden? I spent the evening in Grandma's study reading through her letters and journals with new understanding. She'd known everything, fought to protect everyone she could, and still hoped somehow her son would change. The depth of her strength humbled me. A soft knock interrupted my reading. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Henderson with a thermos and 2 cups. Thought you might need company, she said when I opened the door. It's been quite a day. We sat on the porch sharing tea and watching fireflies dance in the garden. The house felt peaceful again, as if Grandma's spirit was satisfied with the day's justice. Your grandmother would be proud, Mrs. Henderson said softly. Not happy, never happy about this, but proud of how you handled it. I feel like I failed him somehow, I admitted. Like I should have tried harder to have a relationship, maybe things would have been different. Mrs. Henderson snorted. Honey, your father was stealing from relatives before you were born. You didn't fail him. He failed, you failed your grandmother, failed every basic standard of human decency. Some people are just broken, and it's not your job to fix them. Her words carried the wisdom of experience. We sat in comfortable silence, 2 women united by love for another woman whose legacy would outlive her son's crimes. As night deepened, I thought about tomorrow. The trial would be brutal, the media coverage invasive, the family secrets laid bare for public consumption. But Grandma's house stood strong around me, filled with love that no amount of greed could steal. Dad had unraveled, revealed as the predator he'd always been. His empire of deception was crumbling, taking him and his accomplices down with it. But from the ashes, something new was growing. A network of survivors, a legacy of protection, and the knowledge that one woman's foresight had saved dozens of others from harm. The house was safe. The truth was revealed. Justice was beginning. And somewhere I was certain Grandma Rose was smiling. 3 weeks into the pre-trial discovery phase, I sat in the prosecutor's office surrounded by bankers' boxes filled with evidence. Each box held another chapter of Dad's crimes, another family destroyed, another elderly victim betrayed. But Torres had called me in for something specific, something he'd warned would be difficult to hear. We finished analyzing the journals from the storage unit. He began, his usually confident demeanor subdued. Your father was comprehensive in his record-keeping. He documented everything, including things about your family history you might not know. He handed me a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. Dad's handwriting from decades ago, neater and more controlled than his current scrawl, filled every line. This entry is from 1985, Torres indicated. He would have been 22. I read with growing horror. Successfully convinced Grandma Sarah to sign the power of attorney. The confusion from her medication is working perfectly. Told Mom the doctor prescribed it for anxiety, but it's really Valium from that dealer on campus. Grandma's savings should last through my senior year if I'm careful. Mom suspects nothing too trusting as always. Great-Grandma Sarah. His own grandmother, the woman who'd immigrated from Poland with nothing and built a small fortune through decades of hard work. He drugged and robbed her while still in college. It gets worse, Torres warned as I turned pages. Entry after entry detailed his schemes. He'd stolen from aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone with assets and trust in family. He documented techniques for forging signatures, optimal drug dosages for confusion, without obvious impairment ways to isolate victims from potential protectors. One entry from 1991 stopped my breath. Marie's life insurance came through. $2 million, just like I planned. Everyone believes the car accident story. Even little Natalie, though she keeps asking when Mommy's coming home. Told her heaven needed angels. The sympathy is useful. People don't suspect grieving widowers. Need to be careful with the money, though. Mom's already asking questions about my new car. I dropped the journal, my hands shaking. Marie, my mother. The car accident that had shaped my entire life. We're investigating, Torres said gently. The accident report shows brake failure on a remote road. Your mother's vehicle had been serviced 2 days before at a shop your father recommended. The shop closed years ago, but we're tracking down mechanics who worked there. The room spun. My mother hadn't died in a random accident. She'd been murdered by the man who'd vowed to love and protect her, killed for insurance money by my own father. There's more, Torres continued reluctantly. Your grandmother knew. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. We found her own journals in the materials from Mr. Harrison. She suspected, but could never prove it. It's why she changed her will, why she protected you so carefully. He showed me Grandma's journal, her familiar handwriting blurred by my tears. I've failed Marie and Sarah both. Failed to see what Robert was until too late. The police say there's no evidence that I'm a grieving mother looking for someone to blame. But I know my son. I've seen what he's capable of. All I can do now is protect Natalie. Give her the love and stability Robert would destroy. She must never know. The burden of suspecting your father of murder is too heavy for a child. I'll carry it alone. The weight of Grandma's secret pressed down on me. She'd raised me knowing her son had likely killed my mother, protecting me from that truth, while ensuring I'd never be alone with him. Every supervised visit, every excuse for why Dad couldn't take me overnight, every careful boundary, it all made terrible sense now. We need to ask, Torres said carefully. Did you ever notice anything unusual? Any memories that might help the investigation? I thought back through the fog of decades. I remember Mom and Dad fighting about money. She'd hidden bank statements, wanted to know where his salary went. The night before she died, she told me we might be living with Grandma soon. I thought she meant a visit. She was leaving him, Torres concluded. That's often the trigger in these cases. When the victim threatens the asset stream, the perpetrator escalates. A knock interrupted us. Detective Morrison entered with more files and a grim expression. We found something else. Robert Winters took out life insurance policies on dozens of people over the years. Most never knew. Some died in accidents or sudden illnesses. We're reopening 8 death investigations. 8 potential murders. My father wasn't just a thief, but possibly a serial killer who'd weaponized family trust for decades. The magnitude of evil was incomprehensible. There's a survivor who wants to meet you, Morrison added. Bethany Coleman. Her aunt died 5 years ago, shortly after Robert befriended the family. She's been investigating on her own hit Dead Ends until this case broke. I agreed to meet her, needing to connect with someone else who understood this particular horror. We met at a coffee shop downtown, 2 women bound by suspicion and loss. Bethany was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with determined eyes that had seen too much. Aunt Helen was healthy as a horse. She began without preamble, ran marathons at 70. Then she met Robert at a charity function. Within 6 months, she was dead from organ failure. Doctors called it natural causes, but I knew better. She'd compiled her own evidence file photos of Dad with her aunt bank statements showing suspicious transfers, medical records indicating sudden decline after perfect health. I tried getting police interested, but without proof of poisoning, they wouldn't investigate. Your case gives me hope for justice. We compared notes, finding patterns. Dad targeted women, either widowed or never married those without strong family networks. He researched meticulously attended charity events and senior center gatherings, presented himself as a caring relative or romantic interest, the hunting ground of the vulnerable. He's a serial predator, Bethany said flatly. The money was just a bonus. He enjoyed the control, the deception, watching them trust him while he plotted their deaths. Her words rang true. The journals showed increasing sophistication and decreasing remorse over time. He'd evolved from desperate thief to calculating killer refining methods and expanding networks. Sharon had been his latest tool, but there would have been others if we hadn't stopped him. My phone rang, showing Mr. Harrison's number. His voice was urgent. Natalie, your father's lawyer filed a motion. He's claiming diminished capacity, saying the journals were fiction written for a novel. He wants them thrown out as evidence. The audacity was breathtaking. Caught with detailed confessions, Dad was trying to rebrand himself as a misunderstood writer. But I knew him better now, understood the depths of his narcissism. He made one mistake, I told Mr. Harrison. The entries include details only the perpetrator would know. Bank account numbers, specific drug dosages, times, and dates that match victim deaths. Fiction doesn't accidentally align with reality that precisely. That evening, I returned to Grandma's house to find a gathering on my lawn. Linda Patterson, Maria Gonzalez, Eleanor McKnight, Bethany Coleman, and others I didn't recognize. Victims and families united by Dad's crimes, drawn together by shared pain and determination. We're forming a foundation, Linda announced, the Rose Winters Foundation for Elder Protection. Your grandmother tried to warn people about Robert. We want to continue her work, educate families about predators who target the elderly. I stood surrounded by Dad's victims, transformed into advocates. From evil, good was growing. From betrayal, community was forming. Grandma would have loved the poetic justice of it. Inside the house, we organized. Eleanor, despite her recovery, proved a fierce strategist. Maria's children offered technical expertise. Linda brought legal knowledge from her own battles. We were building something powerful, something that would outlast Dad's legacy of theft and murder. I want to speak at the trial, Bethany declared. Even if Aunt Helen's case isn't officially part of it, people should know the scope of his crimes. Others agreed. The prosecutor had victim impact statements, but we wanted more. We wanted the world to understand that elder abuse wasn't just about money, but about destroying families, shattering trust, stealing final years that should be peaceful. As the meeting wound down, Sharon arrived with a box. She looked haggard but determined. These are from the storage unit, she explained. Photos, documents, things I think belong to victims' families. I'm trying to return what I can. The group's response was mixed, some still angry at her participation, others recognizing her effort at redemption. I took the box, finding the gesture more meaningful than any apology. Inside were treasures stolen from the dead family photos, jewelry bonds, and certificates. Each item represented a life cut short, a family robbed of more than money. We spent hours matching items to victims, small resurrections of memory and meaning. "This was Aunt Helen's," Bethany breathed, holding a pearl necklace. "She wore it every Sunday. He must have taken it after he killed her." The unspoken words hung heavy in the room, but Bethany clutched the pearls like a lifeline one piece of her aunt returned. As everyone prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside. "The whole neighborhood's talking. Some reporters have been snooping around asking about your family history. Be careful, dear. This story's getting bigger." Indeed, the next morning brought news vans to our quiet street. The story of a serial elder abuser with possible murders spanning decades was national news. Dad's photo appeared on every channel, the charming smile now sinister with context. I gave one interview carefully controlled, focusing on the victims rather than sensationalizing the crimes. "Elder abuse is an epidemic hiding in plain sight," I said directly to the camera. "My father wasn't unique, just unusually prolific. Check on your elderly neighbors. Question sudden changes in their health or finances. Trust but verify even with family." The interview went viral, shared by elder advocacy groups nationwide. Tips poured in about similar cases, suspicious deaths, elderly relatives who died after meeting charming strangers. Dad's arrest was catalyzing a national conversation about elder vulnerability. That night, I sat in Mom's old room, preserved exactly as she'd left it the morning she died. Her perfume still faintly scented the air. Her journal lay on the nightstand, final entry, cheerful with plans for a weekend trip that never happened. "I know the truth now," I whispered to her memory. "He'll pay for what he did to you, to Great-Grandma Sarah, to all of them. I promise." The room felt warmer somehow, as if Mom's spirit acknowledged the vow. 2 strong women had died protecting their families from Robert Winters. Their sacrifice wouldn't be wasted. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more victims, more evidence of a lifetime spent preying on the vulnerable. But tonight I drew strength from their memories. Mom and Grandma, both victims of Dad's evil, both fierce protectors, despite their fate. The foundation was registered. The victims were united. The truth was emerging from decades of shadows. Dad had built an empire on the graves of the elderly, but we were ensuring it would crumble completely, taking him down forever. Justice for the dead, protection for the living. It's what Grandma would have wanted. It's what Mom died trying to achieve. And it's what I'd deliver no matter the cost. The FBI field office in downtown occupied a gleaming federal building, all glass and steel and security checkpoints. I'd been summoned by Special Agent Diana Chen, who was leading the multi-state investigation into what they were now calling Operation Winter's End. The name felt appropriate at the end of my father's decades-long season of predation. Agent Chen met me in a conference room wallpapered with photos, documents, and connection strings that looked like a spider's web. Dad's photo sat at the center with lines radiating out to faces of victims across 20 years and 12 states. "Ms. Winters, thank you for coming," she began, her voice carrying the weight of what she'd uncovered. "Your father's case has connected to 3 other investigations we've been running. He wasn't working alone." My blood chilled. "What do you mean?" She pointed to several photos on the wall. Robert Winters was part of a loose network of individuals who shared information about vulnerable elderly targets. They traded techniques, recommended corrupt notaries and doctors, even passed victims between them, like inventory. One face stood out among the accomplices: Dr. Marcus Henley, a geriatrician who'd been quietly helping elder abusers by providing medical cover for poisonings and mental capacity evaluations. Another was Patricia Vance, a estate planning attorney who'd helped create fraudulent documents for dozens of schemes. "Sharon McKnight Winters has been invaluable," Agent Chen continued. She provided access to encrypted communications between your father and these associates. They called themselves the inheritors, like it was some kind of gentleman's club instead of a criminal conspiracy. She showed me printouts of messages that turned my stomach. Dad bragging about his success rate, sharing tips on optimal drug combinations, recommending targets to associates in other states. The casualness of their evil was breathtaking. "This message particularly concerns us," Agent Chen indicated. "Sent 2 weeks before your grandmother's death." I read Dad's words to Dr. Henley. "Rose is getting suspicious. Might need your special house call soon, the one that ends with natural causes on the death certificate." He was planning to murder her. I whispered, though part of me had suspected this truth. "We believe your grandmother's decision to create the video will and change her estate planning disrupted his timeline," Agent Chen explained. "She moved too fast for him to implement his plan. Her natural death 3 years ago was just that natural despite his intentions." Relief and horror warred in my chest. Grandma had died peacefully in her sleep, but only because she'd outmaneuvered her own son's murder plot. How had she lived with such knowledge? How had she smiled at family dinners knowing what he was? "There's more," Agent Chen said, pulling out another file. "We've connected your father to suspicious deaths in assisted living facilities where Dr. Henley had privileges, elderly residents who died unexpectedly after recent changes to their wills. We're exhuming bodies for toxicology testing." The numbers were staggering. Potentially 30 victims over 20 years, though proving murder this long after would be challenging. Still, the pattern was clear. Dad and his network had turned elder murder into an industry. "What do you need from me?" I asked, though the investigation's thoroughness was already overwhelming. "Access to everything your grandmother left regarding your father. She was building a case for years. Her evidence might help us identify victims we haven't found yet." I agreed immediately, arranging to deliver Grandma's files that afternoon. As I prepared to leave, Agent Chen stopped me with one more revelation. "Your father kept trophies," she said quietly. "Items from each victim. We found them in a climate-controlled storage unit. Would you be able to identify anything that belonged to your mother?" The drive to the FBI evidence warehouse passed in a blur. I'd thought I was prepared for more horror, but seeing Dad's trophy collection nearly broke me. Hundreds of items carefully labeled and preserved jewelry, watches, family photos, even locks of hair. The methodical organization spoke to a level of sociopathy I couldn't fathom. "Marie Winters, 1991. The evidence technician read from a label. Inside the clear bag was Mom's wedding ring, the one Dad claimed had been lost in the accident. Her driver's license, supposedly destroyed in the fire. A photo of her holding baby me, one I'd never seen before. And horrifyingly, a small vial of brake fluid labeled "Backup Plan Unnecessary." "He sabotaged her car," I said numbly. "He kept proof of his own crime like a souvenir." Agent Chen nodded grimly. "It's common with serial killers. They relive their crimes through these items. Your father saw each death as an achievement worth commemorating." I identified what I could each item, a gut punch of recognition. Great-Grandma Sarah's rosary, a pocket watch I remembered her father carrying, pieces of my family's history stolen and cataloged by the very person who should have protected them. Back at the prosecutor's office, the scope of the investigation continued expanding. Torres had connected Dad to 3 more suspicious deaths through financial records. Sharon provided detailed testimony about his methods turning state's evidence with a vengeance born of her own betrayal. He chose me specifically. She told the grand jury in recorded testimony I was allowed to review. Researched my financial situation, my mother's assets, even my psychological profile from social media. I wasn't a wife. I was a business acquisition. The grand jury had already returned indictments on 47 federal counts. State charges would follow. Dad faced multiple life sentences if convicted, though his new attorney was fighting every charge with expensive vigor. "Where's he getting the money for Reginald Blackwood?" I asked Torres, recognizing the name of one of the nation's premier defense attorneys. That's what we're trying to figure out, Torres admitted. Blackwood doesn't come cheap, and we've frozen all known assets. Someone's funding this defense, but we don't know who. The answer came from an unexpected source. Bethany Coleman had continued her own investigation, following financial trails the FBI had missed. She arrived at my house that evening with a laptop and a grim expression. "I found shell companies," she announced. "Your father was smart, but he trusted the wrong people. Dr. Henley kept records of their shared accounts, probably as insurance. When the FBI arrested Henley yesterday, his wife gave them everything. The records showed millions hidden in offshore accounts, money stolen from dozens of victims over decades. But more interesting was a recent transfer of $500,000 to Blackwood's firm from an account linked to Patricia Vance, the corrupt attorney. She's trying to keep him quiet," Bethany explained. "If your father talks, her entire career implodes. She's probably got her own trophy collection somewhere." We turned the information over to Agent Chen, who seemed unsurprised. Criminals always turn on each other eventually. Vance just made a crucial mistake. That transfer gives us probable cause for a much deeper investigation into her activities. The next morning brought coordinated raids across 3 states. Patricia Vance was arrested at her country club, hauled away in handcuffs, while her society friends watched in shock. Dr. Henley's medical license was revoked pending trial. 2 other members of the Inheritors were caught trying to flee the country. Dad's network was collapsing each arrest, bringing more evidence and connections. The investigation had grown far beyond one man's crimes to expose a hidden industry of elder exploitation. Media coverage was intense, with experts calling it the largest elder abuse case in U.S. history. I gave another carefully controlled interview, this time with a national news magazine. "My father didn't act alone," I emphasized. "He was part of a network that treated our elderly like ATMs to be emptied. This isn't about one bad person, but a system that failed to protect the vulnerable." The response was immediate. Elder advocacy groups gained new members and funding. Legislation was proposed to strengthen penalties for elder abuse. Families nationwide began checking on elderly relatives, questioning sudden health changes or financial decisions. "Your grandmother would be amazed," Mrs. Henderson said over tea in her garden. "She fought this battle alone for so long. Now the whole country's paying attention." But attention came with a price. Reporters camped outside my house. Dad's supporters, few but vocal, sent hate mail calling me a traitor to family values. Someone spray-painted "ungrateful daughter" on my garage door one night. Those security cameras caught the vandal, who turned out to be a distant cousin, hoping to inherit if Dad went free. Through it all, the investigation continued. More bodies were exhumed. More toxicology tests revealed poisoning. The death toll rose to confirmed 15, with another 20 suspected but unprovable. Dad's journal proved invaluable, providing dates and details that corroborated forensic evidence. One entry particularly haunted me. Marie growing suspicious about the tea. Need to accelerate timeline. Break lines easier than slow poisoning. Make it look random. Natalie young enough to forget details. Rose will take her in solve custody problem. He'd planned my mother's murder with the same casual efficiency as a grocery list. My entire life shaped by his calculation that a 5-year-old would forget trauma and a grandmother would provide free childcare while he spent the insurance money. Sharon visited again this time to deliver more evidence. She looked healthier, the stress of living with Dad replaced by the different burden of redemption. "I found these hidden in our house," she said, handing over USB drives. "He didn't know I knew about his hiding spots. There's video." The drives contained surveillance footage Dad had secretly recorded of victims in their homes. He'd installed hidden cameras during visits documenting their deterioration as his poisons took effect. The FBI tech team called it the most disturbing evidence they'd ever processed. "Why?" I asked Sharon. "Why would he record their suffering?" "Control," she answered simply. "He needed to see his power over them. The money was almost secondary. He enjoyed watching them trust him while he destroyed them. I think I think he's a psychopath, Natalie. The real kind, not movie dramatics. He doesn't feel what we feel. Agent Chen confirmed this assessment after Dad underwent psychiatric evaluation. Antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features. No empathy, no remorse, sees other people as objects to manipulate. He's charming when it suits him, but views human connection as weakness to exploit. The evaluation explained so much: why he'd targeted his own family, why he'd kept trophies, why he showed no emotion during court proceedings, except rage when challenged. Dad wasn't capable of love, only mimicry of it for personal gain. As the investigation wound toward conclusion, a final puzzle piece emerged. The FBI had tracked the offshore accounts to their ultimate source, a Swiss bank, that finally cooperated under international pressure. The original seed money, the foundation of Dad's criminal empire, came from a life insurance policy on his own father. "Your grandfather died when Robert was 19, Agent Chen explained. Supposedly a heart attack, but given what we know now, another murder. His first murder. Dad had killed his own father for seed money to start his enterprise. The depravity was complete, a lifetime of parricide and greed dressed up as family devotion. That night I sat in Grandma's study surrounded by evidence boxes and investigation reports. The full scope of Dad's crimes was finally clear: at least 20 murders, dozens more attempted murders, hundreds of thousands stolen families destroyed across decades, all because one man saw relatives as resources rather than relationships. But from this evil had come unexpected good. The Rose Winters Foundation was officially incorporated with Linda Maria Eleanor and others as board members. Bethany was writing a book about recognizing elder predators. New legislation bore Grandma's name. The victims had become advocates, their pain transformed into purpose. The phone rang, showing Torres's number. "Natalie, thought you should know. Your father fired Blackwood. He's representing himself at trial. Says no lawyer understands his vision well enough to defend him." I almost laughed at the narcissism. Dad would defend himself, confident in his ability to manipulate anyone. He didn't understand that his journal, his trophies, his own recordings had already convicted him. The trial was just formality now. Looking at Grandma's portrait, I raised my teacup in a toast. "We got him," I whispered. "All of them. The network's broken, the victims are united, and he'll never hurt another grandmother. You protected me long enough to finish what you started." The house felt peaceful, as if a long battle had finally ended. Tomorrow would bring trial preparation and more revelations. But tonight I could rest, knowing the investigation was complete. Dad's winter of predation was over. Spring would come with justice. The federal courthouse in the city center had never seen media coverage quite like this. News vans lined the street, reporters from national outlets jostled for position, and security had tripled for what journalists were calling the trial of the century for elder abuse cases. I arrived early with Torres and Agent Chen, avoiding the main entrance through a secured side door. "Your father's been busy in jail," Torres informed me as we settled in the prosecutor's preparation room. "He's filed 17 motions, all handwritten, all delusional. He's claiming everything from conspiracy to frame him to accusations that you're not actually his daughter." The last claim stung, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Dad would say anything, destroy anyone to save himself. His narcissism had reached new heights in custody, demanding special meals, private cells, and access to law libraries to prepare his defense. He's also been corresponding with supporters, Agent Chen added, showing me printed emails from monitoring. A small but vocal group who believe he's a victim of family betrayal. They're funding his commissary account and spreading conspiracy theories online. I'd seen the websites, the forums where Dad was painted as a devoted son destroyed by a greedy daughter. They'd edited photos, taken quotes out of context, created an alternate reality where he was the victim. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so toxic. "Ready?" Torres asked as the courtroom opened. Walking into the packed gallery felt like entering an arena. I recognized many faces: Linda Patterson and Maria Gonzalez in the front row, Eleanor McKnight in her wheelchair, beside a healthier-looking Sharon Bethany Coleman with her laptop for notes. Behind them sat dozens more victims and families united in their demand for justice. The defense table sat empty until the bailiffs brought Dad in. Prison had aged him dramatically. His silver hair had thinned, his expensive tan faded to sallow gray. But his eyes remained cold and calculating, scanning the room like a predator studying prey. He wore a suit that hung loose on his diminished frame, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Margaret Thornton," the bailiff announced. Judge Thornton commanded respect with her mere presence. Known for her no-nonsense approach and particular harshness toward financial predators, she'd been specially assigned given the case's complexity. Her opening remarks set the tone. "Mr. Winters, you've chosen to represent yourself against advice of counsel. I'll warn you, once I will not tolerate grandstanding, irrelevant speeches or disrespect in my courtroom. You'll follow procedure or be removed. Understood?" Dad stood with exaggerated dignity. "Your Honor, I understand perfectly. I look forward to revealing the conspiracy against me orchestrated by my ungrateful daughter and her accomplices." Several victims audibly scoffed. Judge Thornton's gavel came down sharp. "Mr. Winters, that's your first warning. Refer to witnesses and victims respectfully or not at all." The prosecution's opening statement was devastating in its simplicity. Torres laid out 20 years of predation with clinical precision using Dad's own journals and recordings as a roadmap. The screen showed faces of the confirmed dead elderly people who'd trusted the wrong person with fatal results. "Robert Winters didn't just steal money," Torres concluded. "He stole final years, final moments, final chances to say goodbye. He turned family love into a weapon and elderly trust into a death sentence. The evidence will show a pattern of evil that shocks the conscience." Dad's opening was exactly what I'd expected, narcissistic rambling disguised as legal argument. He claimed the journals were fiction, the recordings were edited, the witnesses were lying for money. He painted himself as a successful businessman, targeted by jealous relatives and corrupt prosecutors. "Even my own daughter," he gestured dramatically toward me, "conspires against her father for inheritance. She manipulated my poor mother, turned her against her only son. This trial is about greed, but not mine." Several jurors looked skeptical already. Dad had made the classic mistake of a narcissist, assuming his charm worked on everyone when it had long since curdled into obvious manipulation. The first witness was Sharon, who took the stand with visible nervousness but clear determination. Under Torres's gentle questioning, she laid out their relationship, the targeting of her mother, the escalating schemes. "He never loved me," she said quietly. "I was a means to an end. Every kiss, every kind word, every promise was calculated to get closer to my mother's money." Dad's cross-examination revealed his true nature. "Isn't it true you pursued me?" he demanded. "That you lied about your finances to seem more successful?" "I had $20,000 in credit card debt," Sharon replied. "You had me believing that made me worthless, that I was lucky you'd even look at me. Classic abuser tactics I learned in therapy." "Objection," Dad shouted. "She's not qualified to make psychological assessments." "Overruled," Judge Thornton said dryly. "The witness is testifying about her own experience. Continue, Ms. McKnight." Sharon detailed finding the benzodiazepine research, the forged documents, the growing realization of what she'd enabled. Her testimony about her mother's poisoning brought several jurors to tears. "He brought her tea every Sunday," Sharon said, voice breaking. "Called it their special tradition. She'd get confused after, but we blamed her age. He was poisoning my mother in front of me, and I served the cups." Dad tried to shake her testimony, but Sharon had found strength in truth. She admitted her own crimes, her willful blindness, her greed for an easier life. The honesty made her more credible, not less. Eleanor McKnight testified next, still frail but fierce with determination. She described the poisoning symptoms, the confusion, the fear of losing her mind. Photos showed her before and after, a vibrant businesswoman reduced to skeletal fragility. "I built my company from nothing," she said firmly. Worked 70-hour weeks, sacrificed everything. Robert Winters tried to steal it all with a cup of tea and a fake smile. But I'm tougher than he thought. I survived. Dad's cross-examination of an elderly poison victim went as badly as expected. Every aggressive question made him look more monstrous. When he suggested Eleanor was exaggerating for sympathy, she fixed him with a stare that could freeze flame. Young man. She said, though Dad was only 15 years younger. I've negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs and union bosses. You're just another con artist who thought an old lady would be an easy mark. You were wrong. The gallery applauded before Judge Thornton could gavel them quiet. Dad looked genuinely shocked that his charm offensive had failed so spectacularly. The forensic evidence came next. Toxicologists explained the poisoning methods, showing how benzodiazepine in specific doses created confusion without obvious sedation. Handwriting experts confirmed the forgeries. Financial analysts traced the money trails through shell companies and offshore accounts. Mr. Winters was remarkably organized, one expert testified. His financial records read like a masterclass in elder fraud. He documented everything, apparently believing he'd never be caught. Dad tried to challenge the evidence on technical grounds, but his legal knowledge was Wikipedia deep. Judge Thornton grew increasingly frustrated with his objections, finally threatening contempt if he continued disrupting testimony with irrelevant challenges. Then came the trophy evidence. The FBI presented the storage unit's contents with devastating effect. Item after item appeared on screen, each representing a life stolen. The jurors looked sick as the scope became clear. These aren't souvenirs, Agent Chen testified. They're trophies. Serial killers often keep them to relive their crimes. Mr. Winters labeled each item with victim names and dates, creating a catalog of conquests. When Mom's items appeared on screen, I had to leave the courtroom. Linda Patterson followed, finding me sobbing in the hallway. First time's the hardest, she said gently. Seeing proof of what you suspected. But you're strong, just like your grandmother knew you'd be. We'll get through this together. We returned to find Dad attempting to cross-examine Agent Chen about the chain of custody. She calmly destroyed every challenge her FBI training evident in precise answers that left no room for doubt. Mr. Winters, she said when he persisted, your fingerprints are on every trophy. Your handwriting is on every label. Your DNA is on items that should have been destroyed in fires or accidents. There is no question of authenticity. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Marcus Henley, who'd flipped completely in exchange for a reduced sentence. He detailed their partnership with clinical detachment, explaining how he'd provided medical cover for murders. Robert would identify targets, I'd become their doctor, he testified. A little too much medication here, a misdiagnosis there. Natural causes on the death certificate, no autopsy required. We refined it to an art. You murdered people, Torres stated flatly. We expedited inheritances, Henley corrected with chilling calm. Robert saw it as a business service, help families access money tied up in elderly relatives who were just lingering. The gallery erupted in disgust. Several victims' families had to be restrained. Judge Thornton threatened to clear the courtroom if outbursts continued, though her own expression showed she shared their revulsion. Dad's cross-examination of his former partner was a disaster. Henley had no loyalty left, answering every question with damning honesty. He revealed 3 murders Dad hadn't even documented, elderly patients whose deaths had been particularly profitable. You were always sloppy, Henley told Dad directly. Keeping trophies, writing everything down. I told you it would be your downfall, but you needed the admiration needed to relive your cleverness. Classic narcissistic behavior. Having his personality dissected by a fellow predator clearly enraged Dad. His mask slipped completely as he screamed at Henley, calling him a traitor and threatening revenge. Judge Thornton held him in contempt, ordering a recess while Dad was forcibly removed. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed the jury, the defendant's behavior is not evidence of guilt, though you may consider demeanor when assessing credibility. We'll resume tomorrow after Mr. Winters has calmed himself. That evening, the Victims Coalition met at my house. The trial was going better than hoped. Dad's self-representation turning into self-destruction. But the emotional toll was evident on every face. Seeing him try to justify it, Maria said quietly, like we deserve to be robbed because we're old, like our lives don't matter. They matter, Bethany said firmly. Every single life he stole matters. That's why we're here. That's why we're fighting. Not just for justice, but for recognition that elderly lives have value beyond bank accounts. Eleanor, growing stronger by the day, raised her teacup. To the ones who aren't here to testify, we carry their voices now. We toasted with tea in Grandma's china cups, a ritual of remembrance and resolve. Each woman in the room had been touched by Dad's evil, but we'd transformed trauma into purpose. The Rose Winters Foundation already had applications for help from dozens of families suspecting elder abuse. Your grandmother started this, Linda told me, but you're finishing it. She'd be so proud of how you've handled yourself. I thought of Grandma as I looked around the room at her extended legacy. She'd protected me long enough to grow strong to develop the skills needed for this battle. Every legal argument I made, every document I filed, every moment I stood firm against Dad's lies was her influence manifested. The trial would continue for weeks more. There would be more evidence, more testimony, more of Dad's desperate attempts to avoid responsibility. But the outcome was increasingly clear. The mountains of evidence, the credible witnesses, the documented patterns of predation would convict him. He's going to die in prison, Sharon said quietly. I can't decide if that makes me sad or relieved. Both, Eleanor replied, patting her daughter's hand. It's okay to feel both. He was a human being who chose to become a monster. We can mourn the man he could have been while ensuring the man he is never hurts anyone again. As the evening wound down, I walked each woman to her car, accepting hugs and promises of continued support. Tomorrow would bring more testimony, more evidence, more of Dad's unraveling. But tonight, we'd found strength in solidarity. Standing in Grandma's garden under stars, she'd taught me to name, I felt her presence like a warm embrace. The trial was just beginning, but the verdict was written in every document she'd preserved, every protection she'd built, every seed of justice she'd planted. Almost there, Grandma, I whispered to the night. Almost there. 2 weeks into the trial, Sharon McKnight Winters sat in my living room, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. She'd been staying with her mother, but Eleanor was testifying today, and Sharon couldn't face another day in court. The woman who'd once strutted through my home planning renovations now looked fragile, haunted by the weight of her choices. I need to tell you something, she began, voice barely above a whisper, about your father, about why I stayed even when I suspected. I settled into Grandma's chair, prepared to listen. Sharon had been cooperating fully, but this felt different, more personal than legal testimony. My second husband was abusive, she continued. Not physically, but emotionally, financially. He destroyed my self-worth so thoroughly that when Robert came along with his charm and promises, I thought I'd found salvation. She laughed bitterly. I was the perfect mark, desperate for validation, financially struggling with a wealthy mother I felt guilty about neglecting. Robert studied me like a textbook, found every weakness, every insecurity. When did you first suspect something was wrong? I asked gently. The tea, she replied immediately. About 3 months after we married. He was so insistent about making it himself, so particular about Mom drinking it all. When she started having confusion, he was so quick to suggest power of attorney, so prepared with the documents. Her hands trembled around the mug, but I pushed the doubts away, told myself I was being paranoid, that Robert loved us, that he was just being practical. The alternative, that I'd married another predator, was too horrible to consider. What changed? Finding his journal, Sharon said. Not the main one the FBI has, but a smaller one he kept in his car. Just notes, really, but they were about other women. names, ages, assets, and whether they had elderly relatives. I realized I wasn't special. I was just one option he'd selected. She pulled out a small notebook, handing it to me with shaking hands. Dad's handwriting filled pages with clinical assessments of potential targets. Sharon's entry was circled in red. Sharon M., 48, divorced, twice 20,000, debt mother. Eleanor owns commercial properties worth $4.2 million. Vulnerable to affection, responds well to financial security promises. Approach at financial planning seminar. He hunted me, Sharon said simply. Researched my life, my vulnerabilities, my mother's assets. I was a business acquisition, not a wife. The moment I realized that, everything clicked into place. Why didn't you leave then? Fear, she admitted. I'd seen what he did to people who opposed him, the legal threats, the character assassination. And by then I was complicit. I'd signed documents, participated in schemes. He made sure I was dirty enough that leaving meant destroying myself. She described the escalating control, how Dad had isolated her from friends, convinced her that her family saw her as a failure, that he was her only source of stability. Classic abuse tactics refined over decades of practice. But when I saw him preparing documents about your grandmother's house, Sharon continued, I remembered meeting Rose once at a charity event. She was kind to me, genuinely interested in my life. The thought of Robert stealing from another woman like that, it broke something in me. You could have warned me, I pointed out, trying to keep accusation out of my voice. I tried to convince him the scheme wouldn't work, Sharon said. Told him you were too smart, that the documents looked fake. He said I was jealous of his mother's love for you, that I wanted you out of the picture. Every concern I raised got twisted into evidence of my own inadequacy. She showed me text messages between them, Dad's responses to her doubts dripping with contempt and manipulation. You're lucky I married you, one read. No one else would tolerate your paranoid delusions. Stop questioning me and remember your place. The night before we came to your house, Sharon revealed, I almost called you. Had my phone in hand, your number pulled up from when I'd researched you. But Robert came in, saw what I was doing. The look in his eyes, I've never been more afraid. Did he hurt you? The question came out harder than intended. Not physically, he didn't need to. He just very calmly explained what would happen if I betrayed him, how my mother would suffer, how my children would learn what a failure I was, how I'd end up homeless and alone. Then he made me tea, the same special blend he gave my mother, and watched me drink every drop. He drugged you. A warning, Sharon confirmed. I was confused for hours, couldn't remember things. He told me that was just a taste of what he could do. After that, I was too terrified to resist. I became the accomplice he needed, hating myself more each day. Her story painted Dad in an even darker light. Not just a predator, but a psychological torturer who enjoyed breaking people down. Sharon had been victim and accomplice, both trapped in a web of manipulation and fear. The day of the arrest, she continued, when you told me about my mother being poisoned, something snapped. All the fear disappeared, replaced by rage. He'd used me to hurt the one person I truly loved. That's when I decided to burn everything down, starting with him. And you have I acknowledged. Your testimony has been crucial. It's not enough, Sharon said firmly. I helped him try to steal your home, your heritage. I stood by while he planned worse. Testifying is the minimum I owe you and everyone else he hurt. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've been doing my own investigation, going through everything I can find, trying to identify more victims. These are people Robert researched but hadn't approached yet. I've been warning them anonymously, mostly about what nearly happened. The folder contained detailed notes on dozens of elderly individuals across multiple states. Dad's future victims saved by Sharon's intervention. It was redemption in action, each warning a life potentially saved. There's something else, Sharon said, her voice dropping. About your mother. Robert talked in his sleep sometimes, especially after drinking. One night, about a month ago, he was having a nightmare. He kept saying break lines and Should have used the T. I think he was reliving what he did. The confirmation hit like a physical blow, even though I'd already known the truth. Hearing that Dad still dreamed of murdering my mother, that it haunted his unconscious mind, provided a strange form of justice. He might be incapable of remorse, but his crimes followed him into sleep. I recorded it, Sharon added quietly, on my phone. I'd started recording him whenever possible insurance in case things went bad. The FBI has the files now, but I thought you should know. Even monsters have nightmares. We sat in silence for a while, two women bound by one man's evil. Sharon had made terrible choices, but she'd also been systematically broken down by a master manipulator. Her redemption couldn't erase her crimes, but it could prevent future ones. "I'm starting therapy," she said eventually, trying to understand how I became someone who could participate in elder abuse. The therapist says I was trauma bonded, that Robert triggered responses from my previous abuse. It doesn't excuse anything, but maybe understanding helps prevent it happening again. "What will you do after the trial?" I asked. "Community service isn't enough," Sharon replied with surprising firmness. "I want to work with the foundation you're building. Not in any leadership role, I know that's impossible. But maybe I can help identify warning signs, share what I learned about how predators choose accomplices." It was a complicated request. Many victims wouldn't want Sharon anywhere near the foundation, but her inside knowledge could be valuable. Her story, a warning to others who might be slowly pulled into similar schemes. "I'll discuss it with the board," I promised. "No guarantees, but we'll consider it." Sharon nodded, understanding the generosity even in that limited offer. "There's one more thing. About the house, your grandmother's house. Robert had backup plans if the will scheme failed. He'd researched contractors who do insurance fraud, looked into ways to damage the property that would look accidental. He was never going to stop." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Even failing Dad would have tried to destroy what he couldn't steal. The house that represented love and family to me was just an asset to him, worthless if he couldn't monetize it. "He hated that your grandmother loved you more," Sharon observed. "Every time he mentioned you, there was this rage underneath. You represented his failure proof that Rose saw through him. The house was just a symbol. He wanted to hurt you, not just rob you. He succeeded in that," I admitted. "Learning about my mother, seeing what he was capable of, there's no coming back from that." "But you're still standing," Sharon pointed out. "The house is safe, the foundation is growing, and he's going to prison forever. You won, Natalie. Despite everything he threw at you, you won." Eleanor's testimony that afternoon was powerful. She'd returned to her business empire's commanding presence, describing the poisoning with clinical detail that made several jurors visibly angry. Her love for Sharon was evident, but so was her determination to see justice done. "My daughter was a victim too," Eleanor stated firmly when asked about Sharon's involvement. "Robert Winters is a predator who specialized in breaking down women to access their relatives. Sharon will face consequences for her choices, but the real monster is sitting right there." She pointed at Dad with a steady finger. He tried to maintain his composure, but Eleanor's accusation clearly rattled him. Here was a woman he'd failed to kill, bearing witness to his methods. That evening, Sharon and Eleanor joined the victims' support group meeting. The reception was mixed, some victims still angry at Sharon's participation, others recognizing a fellow survivor. Linda Patterson, ever the voice of pragmatic compassion, addressed the elephant in the room. "Sharon made choices that hurt people," Linda said directly. "But she's also proof of how these predators operate, how they recruit accomplices, how they build networks of complicity. Learning from her mistakes might save others." The group slowly opened to Sharon's presence, especially when she shared her documentation of Dad's research methods. Her notes on his manipulation tactics were particularly valuable, showing how predators identified and exploited specific vulnerabilities. "He kept score," Sharon revealed to the group. "Not just money stolen, but people broken. He had a ranking system for how thoroughly he'd destroyed someone's life. Extra points if they never recovered, if they died believing he loved them. The systematic cruelty took everyone's breath away. This wasn't crime of opportunity, but calculated sadism disguised as family relationships. Dad had gamified elder abuse, turning it into a scoring system for his own entertainment. Bethany Coleman studied Sharon's notes with intense focus. "This is invaluable for my book," she said. "Understanding the predator's perspective, how they choose victims and accomplices. With your permission, Sharon, I'd like to interview you extensively." "Anything that helps," Sharon agreed immediately. "If one person avoids falling into a similar trap, maybe I can balance the scales a little." The meeting evolved into a strategy session for the foundation. With Sharon's inside knowledge and the group's collective experience, we developed screening tools for identifying potential elder abuse situations. Red flags that seemed obvious in hindsight became teaching points for future prevention. "Isolation is key," Maria's daughter Angela noted, typing rapidly on her laptop. "The predator always tries to separate the victim from support systems. If someone new is suddenly gatekeeping access to an elderly relative, that's a warning sign." "Changes in documentation," Eleanor added. "New wills, powers of attorney, especially if prepared by attorneys the family doesn't know. Robert always had his own corrupt lawyers ready." "And the T," several voices said simultaneously, dark humor and shared trauma. As the evening wound down, Sharon approached me privately. "Thank you for letting me be here. I know I don't deserve kindness after what I did." Grandma believed in redemption. I replied, thinking of Rose's infinite capacity for hope. "She gave Dad 40 years of chances he squandered. You're actually trying to make amends. That matters." Sharon's eyes filled with tears. "I dream about it sometimes. The day we came to take your house. How cruel I was talking about gutting your grandmother's library. I wish I could take it back." "You can't," I said simply, "but you can make sure it never happens to anyone else. That's what the foundation is about. Not just punishment, but prevention." As Sharon and Eleanor left together, the bond between them visibly stronger despite the trauma, I reflected on the complex nature of justice. Dad would pay for his crimes, spend his remaining years in prison. But true justice meant more than punishment. It meant healing for survivors, protection for future victims, and systematic change to prevent similar predations. Sharon's redemption arc wasn't complete and might never be. She'd face her own legal consequences, live with the shame of her choices, struggle to rebuild trust with everyone, including herself. But she was trying, and in the shadow of Dad's absolute evil, her effort at reformation shone brighter. The trial would continue tomorrow. More evidence, more testimony, more of Dad's increasingly desperate attempts to avoid responsibility. But something had shifted with Sharon's full cooperation. The predator's methods were exposed not just through his victims, but through his accomplice, providing a complete picture of how such evil operated. "We see you now," I whispered to Dad's photo in the evidence file. "All your tricks, all your manipulations, all your careful planning. We see it all, and we're going to stop others like you." The foundation had found an unexpected ally in Sharon McKnight Winters. Complicated, compromised, but ultimately committed to preventing others from falling into the same trap. It wasn't the justice story anyone expected, but it was the one we got. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. 3 days before I was scheduled to testify, Torres called an emergency meeting. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of concern as he spread new documents across the conference table. "Your father's been busy in jail," he began. "He's filed a motion claiming incompetent counsel, saying his previous attorney, the one he fired, sabotaged his case. He wants a mistrial." "Can he do that?" My stomach clenched at the thought of starting over. "He can try," Torres replied. "But Judge Thornton isn't easily fooled. The bigger issue is this." He pushed a handwritten document toward me. "He's subpoenaed character witnesses, including some names that surprised us." I read through the list, recognizing most as distant relatives or former business associates. But 3 names made my blood run cold: Jennifer Walsh, my college roommate; David Chen, my ex-fiancé; and Patricia Simmons, my therapist from a decade ago. You can't subpoena my therapist, I protested. That's privileged. He's not asking for therapy records, Torres explained. He's calling her as a character witness claiming she can testify to your manipulative personality and pathological need for control. It's nonsense, but it shows he's been researching your life extensively. The violation felt profound. Dad had investigated my past looking for ammunition to destroy my credibility. The college roommate I'd lost touch with, the relationship that ended amicably, the therapist I'd seen during law school stress, all dragged into his twisted narrative. We need to prepare you, Agent Chen said, joining the conversation. His strategy is clear: paint you as a calculating daughter who manipulated Rose into cutting him out. He'll try to trigger emotional responses, make you look unstable or vindictive. He knows your buttons, Torres added. Every parent does. He'll use that knowledge to try to break you on the stand. We need to practice until you can face anything he throws at you without flinching. The next 3 days became intensive preparation. Torres and his team ran mock cross-examinations, each more brutal than the last. They dredged up every failure, every mistake, every moment of doubt in my life. Isn't it true you failed the bar exam on your first attempt? The mock prosecutor pressed. Yes, I replied calmly as coached. Like 30% of test takers, I studied harder and passed the second time. You were in therapy during law school. Why? Academic stress and grief processing after my grandmother's best friend died. Seeking mental health support shows wisdom, not weakness. They threw Dad's likely accusations at me relentlessly, that I'd poisoned Grandma against him, that I'd manipulated her will, that I was money-hungry, vindictive, a disappointment as a daughter. Each attack stung, but repetition built armor. He'll try to make you angry, Torres warned. Anger makes people sloppy, say things they regret. Stay calm, stick to facts, don't let him bait you into emotional responses. Between preparation sessions, I met with the witnesses Dad had subpoenaed. Jennifer Walsh, now a suburban mother of 3, was bewildered by the summons. I haven't talked to you in 10 years, she said over coffee. What could I possibly say about your character? He's fishing, I explained. Looking for anything negative. Did we ever fight? Did I ever do anything he could twist? Jennifer thought carefully. You were studious, maybe a little uptight about grades. Oh, and you once reported our suite-mate for stealing food. But that's hardly character assassination material. We strategized responses to potential questions, Jennifer promising to be brief and factual. She seemed offended by the attempt to use her against me, remembering our friendship fondly, despite the distance years had created. David Chen was equally supportive. Your dad's really reaching, he said, reviewing the subpoena. We dated for 2 years, broke up because of career geography, stayed friends. What's he hoping I'll say? Probably that I'm controlling or manipulative, I guessed. He needs to establish a pattern of behavior. The only pattern I remember is you bringing me soup when I was sick and proofreading my dissertation. David laughed. If caring about people is manipulation, we're all guilty. The therapist meeting required more delicacy. Dr. Patricia Simmons maintained professional boundaries while explaining what she could and couldn't say. I can confirm you were my patient and speak to general observations about your character, she said carefully. I cannot discuss treatment specifics. If he pushes for protected information, I'll invoke privilege. What do you remember about my general character? I asked, curious myself after so many years. A young woman dealing with academic pressure and family complications with remarkable resilience, she replied. You were introspective, perhaps overly self-critical, but ultimately focused on growth and understanding. Hardly the manipulative monster he's trying to portray. While I prepared testimony, the Victims Coalition marshaled their own resources. Linda Patterson organized a support schedule, ensuring I'd have friendly faces in the gallery throughout my testimony. Maria Gonzalez's children created social media campaigns to counter Dad's supporters' narrative. Eleanor McKnight hired a public relations firm to ensure accurate media coverage. We won't let him isolate you, Linda declared at an emergency meeting. That's what predators do, make victims feel alone. You'll see us every time you look up from that witness stand. Bethany Coleman had been researching Dad's supporters, discovering most were connected to earlier schemes. 3 are former accomplices who escaped prosecution, she reported. 2 are family members of other perpetrators. They're not defending your father so much as defending the entire ecosystem of elder abuse. The revelation that Dad was part of a larger network still actively operating fueled our determination. This trial was about more than one man's crimes. It was about exposing and destroying an entire predatory system. Mrs. Henderson and the Neighborhood Watch increased their vigilance as the trial approached its climax. She reported suspicious cars driving slowly past my house, individuals photographing the property. "Your father's supporters are getting bold," she warned. "Keep your security system armed. Don't answer the door for strangers." The threat felt real but distant, overshadowed by preparation for testimony. Torres ran through my testimony outline repeatedly, ensuring every word was precise, every emotion controlled. "Remember, you're not just a victim," he emphasized. "You're a witness to patterns of abuse spanning decades. Your testimony connects dots the jury needs to see. Stay focused on that larger purpose." The night before my testimony, I couldn't sleep. I wandered Grandma's house, drawing strength from every familiar corner. In her study, I found a letter she'd written but never sent, addressed to me. "My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, the storm has come. I've prepared you as best I could, teaching you strength disguised as gardening lessons, courage wrapped in bedtime stories. Your father will try to break you with words as he broke others with schemes. But you are not breakable. You are my granddaughter, heir to generations of women who survived worse and thrived despite it. Speak your truth. Honor the dead. Protect the living. I am with you always. Love, Grandma." I folded the letter carefully, planning to carry it in my suit pocket tomorrow, a talisman of love against Dad's hatred. Sharon called near midnight, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I have no right to offer support, but I wanted you to know I'll be there tomorrow. What he did to your mother, to all of them, it needs to be said. You're brave to face him." "We're all brave," I corrected. "Every person who testifies who stands up to predators like him. You included Sharon. Your testimony helped build this case." "It's not enough," she said quietly. "But tomorrow, watching you face him down, maybe that's another step toward redemption." As dawn approached, I prepared carefully. The charcoal suit that made me feel powerful, Grandma's engagement ring on my right hand, minimal makeup hair in a simple style that couldn't distract. Every choice deliberate, presenting myself as the competent attorney and loving granddaughter I was. Torres met me at the courthouse's secure entrance. "Ready?" "No," I admitted, "but I'll do it anyway." "That's courage," he said simply. "Doing what's necessary despite fear. Your grandmother would be proud." The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with victims, supporters, media, and Dad's small but vocal contingent. I took the witness stand, placing my hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. The same oath Dad had taken while lying through every word. Judge Thornton nodded to Torres. "You may begin." As Torres led me through preliminary questions, establishing my relationship to Dad and Grandma, I found my rhythm. The preparation paid off, answers flowing smoothly, emotion present, but controlled. I was not just Natalie, the granddaughter, but Natalie, the attorney, presenting evidence with professional precision. "Please describe your father's relationship with your grandmother," Torres prompted. "Complex and ultimately exploitative." I replied the words practiced but true. He presented himself as a caring son while systematically stealing from her for 40 years. She loved him despite knowing what he was hoping he'd change. That hope was weaponized against her. I detailed the thefts, the schemes, the escalating boldness of his crimes. The jury listened intently, several taking notes. In the gallery, Linda Patterson nodded encouragement while Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes. "How did you discover the forged will?" Torres asked. I explained the morning of confrontation, Sharon's measurements, Dad's confident cruelty. Every detail rehearsed, but still painful to relive. The violation of my home, the casual destruction of Grandma's legacy, the assumption I'd fold under pressure. What made you suspect forgery? Multiple factors. I listed them clinically. Wrong paper type, anachronistic formatting, incorrect bank information reference to deceased individuals, and a notary seal from someone convicted of fraud. My grandmother was meticulous. This document was amateur in comparison. Torres walked me through the evidence systematically. The video testimonies, the journals, the expanding investigation. I explained each piece's significance, connecting dots for the jury, building the narrative of a lifetime predator finally caught. The defense will claim you manipulated your grandmother, Torres warned. How do you respond? My grandmother graduated college when women were barely admitted, built a business, raised a family, accumulated wisdom over 93 years. I said, firmly meeting Dad's glare. She was brilliant, independent, and absolutely nobody's fool. The suggestion that anyone could manipulate Rose Winters is insulting to her memory and intelligence. Torres concluded his questioning, and Judge Thornton called a brief recess before cross-examination. I stepped down, legs shaky but spirit strong. The first phase was complete. Now came the storm. In the hallway, the victims' coalition surrounded me with quiet support. Eleanor pressed a handkerchief into my hand. Maria whispered prayers in Spanish. Bethany showed me messages of support flooding social media. "You're doing amazingly," Linda assured me. "Clear, calm, credible. He's got nothing to counter that except bluster." But I knew Dad better than that. He'd been planning this cross-examination for weeks, maybe months. Every question would be calculated to hurt, to destabilize, to transform me from credible witness to emotional daughter. He didn't need to prove innocence, just create reasonable doubt. "Ready," the bailiff called. I wasn't, but I returned to the witness stand anyway, Grandma's letter, a comforting weight in my pocket. Dad stood at the defense table, a predator preparing to strike. But I was ready, too armored in truth and love. "Ms. Winters," he began, his voice dripping false concern. "My own daughter. Shall we discuss what really happened to our family?" The battle was joined, and I was going to win. Dad approached the witness stand with theatrical deliberation, each step calculated for maximum impact. He'd changed into a freshly pressed suit during the break, attempting to project authority he no longer possessed. But I saw through the facade to the desperate man beneath. "Ms. Winters," he began, emphasizing the formality, "you claim I stole from your grandmother for 40 years. Do you have any proof from before 2010? "Your own journal entries dating back to 1985, I replied calmly. "Bank records showing forged checks. Great-Grandma Sarah's missing jewelry that appeared in pawnshop records with your signature." "Allegedly, my signature," he corrected. "These could be forgeries themselves created to frame me." "The state's handwriting expert confirmed authenticity," I reminded him, as did 3 independent analysts. He shifted tactics. "You were 5 when your mother died. How can you testify about events you don't remember?" The question was meant to sting, and it did, but I was prepared. "I remember Mom and you fighting about money. I remember her hiding bank statements. I remember her telling me we might live with Grandma soon. Adult perspective clarifies childhood memories." "Or creates false ones," Dad suggested. "Isn't it convenient how your memories support your narrative?" "What's convenient," I shot back before Torres could object, "is how Mom's brake lines failed 2 days after visiting a mechanic you recommended. How her life insurance paid out exactly when you needed money. How you kept her wedding ring as a trophy." Judge Thornton sustained Torres's belated objection, but the damage was done. The jury had heard the accusation, seen Dad's flash of genuine surprise that I knew about the ring. "Let's discuss your relationship with your grandmother." Dad pivoted. "You moved in immediately after her death. Rather eager, weren't you?" "I moved in 3 months after her death following probate. I corrected. She left the house to me in a video-recorded will with 3 witnesses, nothing eager about following legal procedures. But you'd been planning it, hadn't you, visiting more frequently in her final years, becoming indispensable? I visited frequently because I loved her. I helped care for her because she needed it. While you were absent, I was present. That's not manipulation, that's family. Dad's jaw tightened. He wasn't getting the emotional responses he wanted. Every attack met fact, every insinuation met truth. You mentioned I was absent, he said, false hurt creeping into his voice. Did you ever consider why? How your grandmother poisoned our relationship with her constant suspicion? She suspected you because you stole from her, I stated flatly. The poisoned relationship was your doing, not hers. So you say, Dad mused, turning slightly toward the jury. But isn't it possible she was becoming paranoid in her old age, seeing theft where there was only concern? No, I replied firmly. Grandma documented everything meticulously. Dates, amounts, evidence. Paranoia doesn't produce bank records and pawnshop receipts. He tried another angle. You're an attorney specializing in elder law. Quite convenient given this situation. Almost like you've been preparing for this moment. I specialize in contract law, I corrected. I take elder abuse cases pro bono because of what I witnessed growing up. Watching you exploit Grandma inspired me to protect others from predators like you. Predator. Dad's voice rose in practiced indignation. I'm your father. Biology doesn't excuse pathology. I responded, Torres's coaching echoing in my mind. You're my father genetically. But fathers protect their children. You tried to steal my inheritance and took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. That's predation, not parenting. The mention of the insurance policy made several jurors shift uncomfortably. Dad hadn't expected me to know about that, his preparation failing to account for the investigation's thoroughness. That policy was for your protection, he claimed weakly. With you as sole beneficiary, how exactly would that protect me if I died? I let the implication hang heavy in the air. Judge Thornton intervened. Mr. Winters, move on to your next question. Dad shuffled papers, clearly rattled. His cross-examination was falling apart, each practiced attack, failing against simple truth. He tried several more angles over the next hour, questioning my financial motives, my relationship history, even my law school performance. Each attempt met the same calm, factual responses. Finally, he played what he clearly thought was his trump card. Isn't it true you were in therapy for mental health issues? Yes, I replied without hesitation. I sought therapy during law school to manage stress and process grief. Mental health care is health care, nothing more. And didn't you tell your therapist you hated me? Torres objected immediately. Privileged communication, Your Honor. Sustained, Judge Thornton ruled. Mr. Winters, you know better. But Dad pressed on. Without revealing protected information, didn't you have documented emotional problems? I had documented emotional intelligence, I corrected. Seeking help when needed, processing complex feelings appropriately, unlike someone who drugs elderly women and keeps trophies of his murders. Objection, Dad shouted at his own witness. You can't object to your own question's answer, Judge Thornton said dryly, though the witness will refrain from editorial comments. As the hours dragged on, Dad's desperation became increasingly visible. His questions grew more erratic, jumping between topics without coherent strategy. He accused me of elder abuse, of forging documents myself, of conspiring with the victim's coalition for money. These women you've gathered, he gestured toward the gallery, they're hoping for a payday, aren't they? Civil suits to follow criminal conviction. They're hoping for justice, I replied. Most have explicitly refused financial compensation, donating any recoveries to the foundation. Money was your motivation, not theirs. The foundation you conveniently run. The foundation has an independent board of directors. I'm not even a voting member. But you wouldn't understand organizing something without personal profit. By late afternoon, Dad was visibly exhausted. His silver tongue had failed him, charm curdling into obvious manipulation. The jury watched with increasingly skeptical expressions as he grasped for any foothold. "One final question," he announced, though Judge Thornton looked ready to end the circus. "Do you love me?" The courtroom went silent. It was a trap, of course. Say yes, and he'd use it to argue forgiveness. Say no, and he'd paint me as heartless. "I love who you could have been," I answered carefully. "I mourn the father you chose not to be, but I cannot love someone who murdered my mother, poisoned grandmothers, and destroyed families for profit. Love requires humanity you've proven incapable of demonstrating." Dad stared at me for a long moment, perhaps seeing clearly for the first time that his daughter was beyond manipulation. Then he spoke words that would haunt me forever. "Your mother said the same thing, right before her accident." The courtroom erupted. Torres was on his feet objecting. Judge Thornton was banging her gavel. Several victims in the gallery gasped or cried out, but I sat frozen, the admission hanging in the air like a confession. "Mr. Winters." Judge Thornton's voice could have cut steel. "Did you just confess to murdering Marie Winters?" Dad's face went white as he realized what he'd said. "I meant, that's not... I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights." "Too late for that in your own defense," the judge replied. "The jury will note the defendant's statement. Ms. Winters, do you need a moment?" I shook my head, finding my voice. "No, Your Honor. I'm ready to continue." But there was nothing left to continue. Dad slumped back to the defense table, his accidental confession rendering further questions moot. Torres wisely had no redirect, letting Dad's words echo in the silence. As I stepped down from the witness stand, the gallery erupted in whispered conversations. Linda Patterson was crying. Eleanor McKnight looked grimly satisfied. Sharon had her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. The trial continued for 2 more days, but the outcome was decided in that moment. Dad's remaining witnesses were perfunctory character references who seemed embarrassed to be associated with him. His closing argument rambled about conspiracy and persecution, but his heart wasn't in it. Torres's closing was masterful, weaving together 20 years of predation into a narrative of evil hidden behind family ties. He played clips from Dad's accidental confession, from victim testimonies from the video Will Grandma had made. Robert Winters killed his own mother emotionally, if not physically, Torres concluded. He murdered his wife for insurance money. He poisoned elderly women for sport and profit. He kept trophies like a serial killer, because that's what he is, a serial killer who used trust as his weapon. Justice demands he never harm another grandmother, another mother, another family again. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. As we waited in the courthouse cafeteria, the victims' coalition surrounded me with support. We didn't talk about the trial or the expected verdict. Instead, we shared stories about the loved ones we'd lost, the memories Dad couldn't steal. When the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict, we filed back in solemnly. Dad sat alone at the defense table, his few supporters having abandoned him after the confession. He looked smaller, somehow, ordinary evil, stripped of its camouflage. On count 1 murder in the first degree of Marie Winters, we find the defendant guilty. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd expected them. Confirmation of what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. My father had murdered my mother. On count 2 murder in the first degree of Sarah Kowalski. The guilty verdicts continued for 40 minutes. Murder, attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. Guilty on all 47 federal counts. The jury had believed us, believed, the evidence believed that evil could wear a father's face. Judge Thornton thanked the jury for their service, then turned to Dad. "Mr. Winters, you've been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience. You betrayed the most fundamental human trusts, turning family into a hunting ground. Sentencing is scheduled for next month, but I'll note the federal guidelines suggest multiple life sentences." As the guards prepared to lead Dad away, he turned to look at me one last time. No remorse in his eyes, no recognition of wrongdoing, just cold hatred for the daughter who'd exposed him. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. But he was wrong. It was over. His reign of terror, his network of accomplices, his decades of predation, all over. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. I gave a brief statement focusing on the victims rather than victory. 20 years of stolen lives end today. But our work continues. The Rose Winters Foundation will ensure no family suffers what we've endured. Elder abuse thrives in shadows. We're bringing light. That evening, the coalition gathered at my house for a quiet celebration. No champagne or cheers, just tea and remembrance. We'd won, but victory felt hollow without the people we'd lost. "Your mom would be proud," Linda said softly. "You got justice for her and all of them." Sharon attended, still fragile but determined to make amends. "I know it doesn't mean much, but I'm sorry. For everything. For helping him, for not seeing what he was, for the pain I caused." "It means something," Eleanor assured her daughter. "Apologies don't erase harm, but they start healing. That's all any of us can do now, heal and help others." As the evening wound down, I found myself in Grandma's garden. The heritage tomatoes were blooming, defying Dad's plans to destroy them. Life persisting despite attempts to uproot it. Mrs. Henderson joined me as I'd known she would. "Quite a day," she observed. "Rose always knew it would come to this, prepared you for it without you even knowing." "She protected me while teaching me to protect myself," I agreed. "Even gone, she's still taking care of me." "And now you're taking care of others," Mrs. Henderson pointed out. "The foundation, the advocacy, the example you've set. Rose's legacy lives on through you." That night, I sat in Grandma's study writing the first newsletter for the Rose Winters Foundation. We'd already received dozens of applications for help families suspicious about sudden changes in elderly relatives' behavior or finances. Each case would be investigated, support provided, predators exposed. Dad would spend his remaining years in prison, but his legacy would be the foundation that prevented others like him. Every grandmother protected, every family saved, every predator stopped would be another repudiation of his evil. The trial was over. The verdict was delivered. Justice, imperfect but real, had been served. And somewhere I was certain Mom and Grandma were finally at peace. 6 weeks after the verdict, I stood in the federal courthouse for Dad's sentencing. The courtroom was packed again, but the energy felt different. Less tension, more resolution. The Victims' Coalition filled the gallery, some wearing photos of lost loved ones like talismans. Dad entered in shackles, the orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his diminished frame. Prison had aged him rapidly, silver hair now completely white, the practiced charm replaced by hollow rage. He'd filed 17 appeals from his cell, all denied the legal system, finally immune to his manipulations. Judge Thornton reviewed the pre-sentencing report with visible disgust. "Mr. Winters, in my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such calculated evil. You didn't just steal money. You stole final years, final moments, final chances for families to say goodbye. You murdered your own wife, leaving your daughter motherless for profit." She continued through the victim impact statements that had been submitted. 23 families had written about their losses, the ripple effects of Dad's crimes across generations. Children who'd lost inheritances, grandchildren who'd lost grandparents, spouses who'd watched loved ones deteriorate from mysterious illnesses. "Does the defendant wish to make a statement?" Judge Thornton asked. Dad stood slowly, his prepared speech clutched in shaking hands. But instead of reading it, he turned to stare at me with naked hatred. "My daughter destroyed our family," he said, voice raw. "She poisoned my mother against me, conspired with these vultures." He gestured at the gallery, "to steal my legacy. I'm the victim here. I've always been the victim." The delusion was complete. Even facing life in prison, Dad cast himself as the wronged party. No acknowledgement of his murders, his thefts, his decades of predation. In his mind, he remained the hero of his own story. Judge Thornton's expression could have frozen hell. Mr. Winters, your inability to accept responsibility only confirms the necessity of removing you from society permanently. On count 1, murder, in the first degree, I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole." She continued through each count, the sentences stacking like building blocks in a tower of justice. 3 life sentences for the murders, 25 years each for the attempted murders, 15 years for each fraud count. The total was meaningless arithmetic exercise in ensuring Dad would die in prison. "Furthermore," Judge Thornton added, "I'm ordering full restitution to all victims to be paid from any current or future assets. You will have no books written, no interviews given, no profit made from your crimes. Your story ends here in silence and confinement." As the guards led Dad away, he managed one last look at me. But instead of hatred, I saw something worse, absolutely nothing. No recognition of me as his daughter, no humanity at all. Just the blank stare of a predator removed from its hunting ground. Outside the courthouse, the media pressure was intense but different. The story had evolved from sensational crime to advocacy movement. I gave my prepared statement about the foundation's work, then surprised everyone with an announcement. "We're establishing the Marie Winters Memorial Scholarship," I revealed, "for law students committed to elder advocacy. My mother never got to see me graduate, but her memory will help others fight predators, like the one who killed her." Sharon approached as the crowd dispersed. She'd been sentenced the week before 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. The judge had recognized her cooperation and victim status, crafting a sentence that emphasized rehabilitation over punishment. "I've enrolled in social work classes," she told me, "focusing on elder care and abuse prevention. It's not enough, but it's something." "It's a start," I acknowledged. Grandma always believed in education as redemption. The foundation's work had exploded beyond our original scope. We'd hired full-time staff, established a hotline, created educational materials for families. Banks had started partnering with us to flag suspicious account activity. Medical professionals attended our seminars on recognizing drug-induced confusion. "Your grandmother lit a match," Eleanor McKnight observed at our board meeting that afternoon. "You've turned it into a wildfire of change." The impact was measurable. 3 elder abuse rings had been exposed using our identification methods. Dozens of families had intervened before theft or poisoning could occur. Legislation named for Grandma had passed in 7 states, increasing penalties and mandating reporting. But the personal aftermath was harder to navigate. I still lived in Grandma's house now, officially mine, but forever hers in spirit. Some nights I'd dream of Mom alive and laughing, warning me about Dad in words I hadn't understood as a child. Other nights Grandma visited my dreams, proud but sad, the weight of protecting me evident even in death. The trauma manifested in unexpected ways. I couldn't drink tea others prepared the association too strong. I obsessively checked locks installed. Excessive security started at unexpected doorbells. Trust even in innocent contexts came hard. "It's normal," my new therapist assured me. "You've discovered your entire life was shaped by a serial killer's choices. Processing that takes time." Bethany Coleman's book had been fast-tracked for publication. Inherited Evil Inside the World of Elder Predators was already generating advance buzz. She'd interviewed dozens of victims, creating a comprehensive guide to recognizing and stopping such crimes. "I'm dedicating it to all the grandmothers," she told me over lunch, "the ones we lost and the ones we saved." The book's publication coincided with a national conference on elder abuse that the foundation co-sponsored. Prosecutors, social workers, medical professionals, and advocates gathered to share strategies. I delivered the keynote address standing before 500 people who dedicated their lives to protecting the vulnerable. My grandmother knew she couldn't stop her son alone. I began looking out at the sea of faces. So she prepared me to stand here today, asking you to help stop all the Roberts who prey on family trust. Together, we're building a world where love isn't weakness and age isn't vulnerability. The response was overwhelming. New chapters of the foundation formed in 12 cities. Donations poured in from families who'd suffered similar losses. Corporate sponsors offered support, seeing elder protection as both moral imperative and business necessity. But the most meaningful moments came in quiet conversations. A woman in Seattle who'd intervened before her uncle could poison her mother. A man in Boston who'd recognized the warning signs in his father's new girlfriend. Families saved because we'd made our pain public. Each one matters. Linda Patterson reminded our survivor support group. We couldn't save our own, but we're saving others. That's the only victory that counts. Dad tried one last manipulation from prison, sending a letter through his lawyer, offering to reveal more victims' locations in exchange for a transfer to a minimum security facility. The FBI investigated found he was lying, trying to trade false hope for comfort. Even facing life in prison, he remained a predator seeking angles. "He'll never stop," Sharon observed when she heard. "Even if he lives to 90 in that cell, he'll spend every day plotting, scheming, believing he's the victim. That's who he is at his core." We'd all reached that understanding differently. Dad wasn't capable of redemption because he saw nothing to redeem. In his mind, the world owed him everything, and taking it was his right. Prison wouldn't change that, only contain it. The first anniversary of the trial brought unexpected closure. Phoenix authorities had been investigating Eleanor McKnight's poisoning, following financial trails Sharon had provided. They discovered Dad had partners there too, a smaller network targeting wealthy retirees in desert communities. "Your testimony gave us the roadmap," the Phoenix detective told me. 3 more convictions, 7 elderly victims saved. Your father's network is completely dismantled. That evening, I hosted a remembrance dinner. The Original Victims Coalition had grown to over 50 members each, bringing photos of lost loved ones. We set places for the dead, told their stories, celebrated lives cut short but not forgotten. To Rose Winters, Linda raised her glass of lemonade, who fought alone so we could fight together. To all the grandmothers we chorused, may their memories be revolution. Sharon attended, still finding her place in our complicated family of shared trauma. She'd completed half her community service hours, spending them at nursing homes, teaching staff to recognize predatory visitors. Her redemption remained a work in progress, but progress nonetheless. As the evening wound down, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside with an envelope. "Found this in my garden shed. Rose gave it to me years ago, told me to give it to you when the storm passed." Inside was another letter in Grandma's handwriting. "My dearest sunshine, if you're reading this, you've weathered the storm and emerged victorious. I knew you would. You have strength you haven't discovered yet, compassion that turns pain into purpose. Your father took much from our family, but he couldn't take our love, our legacy, our determination to protect others. The house is yours now, not just in deed, but in spirit. Fill it with laughter he tried to silence, grow gardens he tried to destroy, welcome families he tried to break, make it a beacon of the hope he tried to extinguish. I'm proud of you beyond words, not for winning, but for fighting, not for exposing him, but for protecting others. You've turned our tragedy into triumph, our loss into love multiplied. Until we meet again, remember, you are loved, you are strong, and you are never alone. All my love, Grandma." That night, I walked through the house with new eyes, not as a battlefield where we'd fought off Dad's invasion, but as a sanctuary Grandma had preserved for healing. Each room held memories of love, stronger than any predator's evil. In the garden, Grandma's heritage tomatoes grew heavy on their vines. Tomorrow, I'd harvest seeds to share at the Foundation's next event. Each packet would carry instructions for growing, but also for watching, protecting, nurturing what the vulnerable entrust to our care. The aftermath continued to ripple outward. Laws changed, awareness spread, predators found hunting harder, as families learned to watch for signs. Dad's legacy of death was being overwritten by one of life protection and communal care. Standing in Grandma's greenhouse, surrounded by growing things that defied destruction, I finally felt the storm truly passing. Not ended, never fully ended while predators existed, but managed, channeled into purpose, transformed from personal tragedy to public triumph. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered to the night. "We really did it." And somewhere in the gentle rustling of tomato leaves, I swear I heard her answer, "No, sunshine, you did it. I just gave you the tools." The aftermath was becoming the after, and in that after, beauty grew from ashes hope, from horror and love from loss. It was exactly what Grandma had planned all along. 3 years had passed since Dad's sentencing when I stood in Grandma's garden on a perfect spring morning. The heritage tomatoes were in full bloom, their vines heavy with fruit that would soon be harvested and shared. The Rose Winters Foundation was hosting its annual gathering, and over 200 people were expected throughout the day. The house had been transformed into a beacon of hope, just as Grandma had envisioned. What once stood as a potential crime scene now served as headquarters for a national movement. The library Dad had wanted to gut housed resources for families suspecting elder abuse. The greenhouse Sharon had planned to demolish grew seedlings distributed to survivors, each plant a symbol of resilience. "The caterers are here," Mrs. Henderson announced, still my faithful neighbor, and now the foundation's volunteer coordinator, "and the first families are arriving." I smoothed my dress, one of Grandma's favorites that I'd had tailored to fit. Around my neck hung her pearl necklace recovered from Dad's trophy collection and reclaimed as a symbol of survival rather than theft. The early arrivals included familiar faces from the trial. Linda Patterson, now the foundation's vice president, had flown in from Tennessee, where she ran our southeastern chapter. Maria Gonzalez brought her entire extended family, 3 generations united in advocacy. Eleanor McKnight rolled up in a wheelchair she no longer needed, but kept for solidarity with those still recovering. "Look at what you've built," Eleanor marveled, gesturing at the banners, information tables, and volunteers preparing for the day's events. Rose would be amazed. "We built it," I corrected, "all of us together." Sharon arrived separately, still navigating the complex dynamics of her role in our community. She'd completed her social work degree and now worked with Adult Protective Services, using her insider knowledge to identify potential victims. Her redemption wasn't complete, might never be complete, but she devoted her life to prevention. "I brought someone," she said nervously, introducing a young woman named Amy. "She reached out after recognizing her boyfriend's behavior from your interviews, got out before he could access her grandmother's accounts." Amy's story was one of dozens we'd hear throughout the day. Families who'd recognized warning signs intervened before tragedy struck, saved their elderly loved ones from predators who'd studied Dad's playbook. Each success story validated our pain's transformation into purpose. Bethany Coleman had arrived early to set up her booth. Her book had become required reading in elder care facilities nationwide, and she donated all profits to the foundation. Today, she was signing copies and collecting stories for her second book, focused on survivor recovery. "The ripple effects continue," she told me between signatures. "Publishers want books on financial elder abuse, medical professionals are developing better screening protocols, and law schools are adding elder law specializations. Your grandmother lit a fire that's still spreading." By noon, the garden overflowed with people. Survivors shared their stories in healing circles. Prosecutors offered legal advice. Social workers distributed warning signs pamphlets. Children played between the tomato plants, their laughter exactly what Grandma would have wanted, filling her space. The formal program began after lunch. I stood at the podium we'd set up on the porch, looking out at faces marked by loss, but lifted by hope. My speech was memorized, but I set aside the cards speaking from the heart instead. 3 years ago, my father tried to steal this house, I began. He failed because my grandmother had spent decades preparing for his attempt, but she prepared for more than just defense. She prepared for this moment when her home would shelter, not just me, but all of you. I continued, "Each of you carries a story of loss. Parents, grandparents, spouses taken by predators who saw love as weakness. But look around. Your pain has become power. Your loss has become law. Your loved one's memories live in every senior protected, every predator caught, every family saved from what we endured. The crowd was silent, some wiping tears, others nodding with hard-won understanding. In the front row, our board of directors sat together, Linda Eleanor Maria Judge Thornton, who joined after retirement, and others who'd turned trauma into action. My grandmother believed in redemption. I continued glancing at Sharon. She gave my father 40 years of chances he squandered, but she also believed in justice and protection, in building walls against those who would harm the vulnerable. Today, we are those walls. I announced the year's achievements: 1,500 calls to our hotline, 300 interventions, 57 prosecutions, assisted 12 new state laws passed. Numbers that represented lives, saved families, preserved predators, stopped. But we're not done, I emphasized. Elder abuse evolves, predators adapt, and we must stay vigilant. That's why I'm announcing the Rose Winters Institute, a research center dedicated to studying and preventing elder exploitation. My grandmother was a teacher at heart. This institute will ensure her lessons reach every corner of our nation. The crowd erupted in applause. The institute had been a secret project funded by recovered assets from Dad's crimes and matched by corporate donors. It would train prosecutors, develop prevention programs, and ensure no elder faced predation alone. After the formal program, the gathering shifted to celebration. Local musicians played in the garden. Children painted flower pots to take home. Survivors planted new tomato seedlings, each plant tagged with a lost loved one's name. Detective Morrison, now retired but still consulting on elder abuse cases, found me during a quiet moment. "Your father's in solitary again," she informed me. "Tried to run a scheme on other inmates' commissary accounts. Even in maximum security, he can't stop predating." "He never will," I acknowledged. "But he's contained, and that's what matters." As afternoon faded to evening, the crowd gradually thinned. The original coalition remained, as I'd known they would, for our private tradition. We gathered in Grandma's dining room, setting places for our dead, sharing memories and updates. "Helen would have loved this," Bethany said, touching her aunt's photo. "She believed in community action, in women supporting women. This is exactly what she would have built." "My mother's proud," Maria added in her accented English. "I dream of her sometimes. She says we're warriors now, fighting for those who can't fight alone." Sharon sat quietly until Eleanor prompted her to speak. "I know I'll never fully atone," she said carefully. "But today, seeing Amy and others who escaped because we exposed these tactics, maybe my complicity led to something good. Maybe that's the best I can hope for." "Redemption isn't erasure," Linda observed. "It's transformation. You've transformed Sharon. That matters." As twilight settled over the garden, I found myself alone on the porch swing, where Grandma and I had spent countless evenings. The house glowed with warm light, filled with the echoes of hope and healing. Everything she'd protected had not only survived, but flourished. My phone buzzed with a message from the publisher. They wanted me to write a book about our story, the complete narrative of Dad's crimes, and our transformation of trauma into triumph. I'd been resisting for years, but maybe it was time. Grandma's story deserved telling in full. "One more thing to consider," Mrs. Henderson said, joining me on the swing. "That nice prosecutor James asked about you again. Maybe it's time to think about your own future, not just the foundation's." James Torres had indeed shown interest beyond professional collaboration, but I'd been too focused on building the foundation to consider personal possibilities. Maybe Mrs. Henderson was right. Maybe it was time to let love into the fortress Grandma had built. "She'd want you happy," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Not just successful, but happy. This house should hear laughter again, maybe even children's voices. New life to balance all the death we've processed." The thought warmed and terrified me equally. Trust came hard after discovering your father was a serial killer. But Grandma had loved after loss, built after betrayal. Her example suggested possibility beyond pain. As the last volunteers cleaned up and the house settled into peaceful quiet, I walked through each room. The walls held photos, now coalition meetings, survivor celebrations, families reunited. Dad had tried to steal this space, but we'd multiplied its love exponentially. In Grandma's study, I sat at her desk and pulled out writing paper. The book would start with her, the woman who'd fought alone, so we could fight together. It would tell of her courage, her foresight, her transformation of one man's evil into a movement for good. But first, a letter to James. Just coffee, nothing serious. A small step toward the personal life Grandma would have wanted for me. A recognition that surviving wasn't enough. I needed to live. The phone rang before I could write. An unknown number, but I answered anyway. A trembling voice spoke. "Is this the Rose Winters Foundation? I think my son is poisoning me. I found your number online. Please, can you help?" "Yes," I said firmly, reaching for the intake forms. "We can help. You're not alone. Tell me everything." As I listened to another grandmother's fears, I felt Grandma's presence like a warm embrace. This was our true resolution, not just Dad in prison, but every elder protected, every family saved, every predator stopped. We'd built her dream from the ashes of our nightmare. The cycle continued, but differently now. Where once predators hunted in shadows, we shone light. Where once elders suffered in silence, we amplified their voices. Where once families faced exploitation alone, we stood ready to fight beside them. "Thank you for calling," I told the frightened woman after gathering her information. "Someone will be with you tomorrow. Tonight, don't drink anything you didn't prepare yourself. You're going to be okay." After ending the call, I finally wrote my letter to James. Just coffee, but maybe the beginning of adding new love to the love we'd preserved. Grandma's house had protected me long enough. Time to let life fully bloom within its walls. The stars were bright over the garden, the same constellations Grandma had taught me to name. Somewhere I was certain she watched with satisfaction. We'd won more than a court case. We'd won a future where her love multiplied across generations, protecting grandmothers she'd never meet from predators like the son she'd loved despite his evil. "Rest now, Grandma," I whispered to the night. "We've got it from here." The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, no longer haunted by attempted theft, but blessed by successful protection. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new calls, new families to save. But tonight, in the sanctuary, Grandma had preserved all was well. The resolution wasn't an ending, but a beginning, and that I knew was exactly what she'd planned all along. Life lesson. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as our deepest betrayals. Grandma's foresight taught me that true inheritance isn't about property, but about the strength to stand against injustice. By protecting what she'd entrusted to me, I discovered my life's purpose. Her house became more than walls and memories. It transformed into a sanctuary for healing and justice. Family isn't always who we're born to, but who stands with us when we defend what's right. What would you do if someone you trusted tried to take everything from you? Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was in the wrong? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with others who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and the power of love to overcome even the darkest betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you are stronger than you know, and sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build from shared purpose and mutual protection. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone make you feel powerless in your own life.